Hey guys. Tonight we slide gently into a time when shag carpet, amber lighting, and slow music make everything feel softer than it really is. You're here in the present, safe in your room, maybe half listening, but in your mind you're stepping backward into the 1970s, an era that smells faintly of cigarettes, vinyl sleeves, and optimism that's just a little chemically enhanced. Somewhere between a disco beat and a doctor's casual handwriting, you find yourself holding a small pill that promises calm, confidence, and sleep without dreams. It looks harmless. It feels almost polite. And honestly, watching how this goes, you probably wouldn't survive it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a living room that's trying very hard to be stylish. Low couch, thick curtains, a lamp that emits more mood than illumination. Music pulses gently, slow enough that nobody needs to rush. Someone laughs too long at nothing. Someone else offers you a drink you didn't ask for. And then, almost as an afterthought, a pill lands in your palm. Small, white, unassuming. This is Quaalude, though nobody calls it that out loud right now. It's just something that takes the edge off. You hesitate for a moment, which feels dramatic in hindsight. The pill doesn't look like danger. It looks like aspirin's mellow cousin. In this era, doctors prescribe it freely for sleep, anxiety, even nerves, a word that covers a lot of ground in the 1970s. That's the first historical anchor right there. This drug isn't hidden in alleys yet. It's legal, regulated, and casually accepted. A common event of the time is exactly this: someone sharing a prescription sedative at a party like it's a new record. You swallow it with a sip of something sweet. The taste barely registers. Nothing explodes. No immediate fireworks. And that's important, because danger that arrives quietly tends to stick around longer. You lean back, expecting something, maybe nothing, and then, slowly, the room softens, not spins, softens. Edges blur like someone turned down the sharpness on reality. Your body feels heavier, but in a comforting way. Like sinking into a couch that remembers you. Thoughts slow down. Sentences take longer to finish. You laugh again, not because something's funny, but because laughter feels easy. Your limbs respond with a slight delay. Like they're politely asking permission before moving. It's subtle. That's the trick. Here's a lesser-known fact that often gets lost in jokes about the era. Quaaludes weren't marketed as a high. They were sold as a tool for normalcy, for rest, for calm, for smoothing out the rough edges of modern life. That framing matters. You don't feel like you're doing something rebellious. You feel like you're participating in adulthood. Just slower. You notice the music differently now. Each note stretches. The bass feels warmer. Dancing becomes optional. Sitting feels profound. Someone talks to you about something important, work, maybe, or a relationship, and you nod. Deeply invested, even though the words drift through you like clouds. This is sedation masquerading as connection. You stand up at some point, because standing seems like the right thing to do, and immediately regret the ambition. Balance is now a suggestion, not a rule. You laugh it off, Everyone does. Falling slightly becomes a running joke. That's joke number 1 for tonight. You tell yourself you're just relaxed. Too relaxed. Maybe. But relaxed sounds healthy. As the night stretches on, time does something strange. It compresses and expands at once. An hour feels like a minute. A conversation feels like an evening. When you check the clock, if you check the clock, you're surprised by its honesty. This isn't a blackout. Not yet. It's more like selective attention. Your brain is choosing what to keep. At some point, you're offered another pill. This one, same as before. You hesitate less this time. The first didn't hurt you. In fact, it improved things. That's how your internal math works now. Improvement equals safety. It's a flawed equation, but a very human one. You take the second pill. The room lowers another notch. Speech slows further. Words stretch like taffy. You feel calm in a way that feels earned. Like you've finally figured something out that everyone else already knew. That's joke number 2. You feel enlightened by a sedative. It's funny, but only if you're not watching where this goes. Historically, this pattern was common enough to be unremarkable. Multiple doses in one night weren't seen as risky. Warnings existed, technically, but they were soft warnings. Buried under trust in medicine and the cultural belief that legal meant safe. Historians still debate how much of this widespread use was driven by aggressive pharmaceutical marketing versus genuine medical need. Sitting here, half sunk into upholstery, the distinction feels academic. Your body, meanwhile, is taking notes. It doesn't announce this. It just remembers how this feels. It logs the calm, the heaviness, the relief. Your nervous system, always eager for shortcuts, flags this as useful information. You don't feel addicted, you feel assisted. By the time the night winds down, leaving becomes a project. Keys feel heavier than they should. Steps require planning. You promise yourself, silently, that you'll be careful. That this is just a sometimes thing. A weekend thing. A party trick. That's joke number 3. The idea of moderation whispered while your pupils struggle to focus. You eventually make it home. Or somewhere close enough. Sleep comes fast but shallow. You drift under without dreams. Without real rest. Morning arrives like an inconvenience. Not a reset. Your head feels full of cotton. Your body feels borrowed. As you lie there, blinking into amber daylight, a thought crosses your mind, not fear. Not regret. Just curiosity. That feeling last night, that slowing, smoothing sensation, it worked. And work, you realize, is a dangerous word when it comes to chemicals. You don't know it yet, but your body has already marked this experience as something worth repeating. And repetition, as history quietly teaches, is where the story really begins. You don't wake up refreshed. You wake up managed. That's the best word for it. Like someone adjusted your internal settings overnight without telling you. Your limbs respond slowly. Your thoughts arrive a beat late. And the morning light feels unnecessarily bright. Like it's asking questions you're not prepared to answer. This sensation becomes familiar quickly. Not alarming. Familiar. You stretch, testing your body like a new appliance. Everything works. Technically, you're just muted. Coffee helps, but only a little. The fog thins without fully lifting. Like a window wiped with a dirty rag. You shrug it off. Lots of people wake up like this. It's the 70s. Everyone's tired. That's joke number 1, blaming an entire decade for how you feel. Later that day, someone asks how you slept. You pause, searching for the right word. Fine, you say, because it's accurate enough. Quaaludes were often prescribed as sleep aids. After all, doctors wrote them out casually. Sometimes over the phone, sometimes with barely a conversation. This wasn't a fringe behavior. It was a common medical event of the era. Sedation as treatment. Calm as cure. You find yourself thinking about last night more than you expect to. Not obsessively, just gently. Like a song stuck in your head that you don't mind humming. The way the edges of the room softened. The way nothing felt urgent. You realize how rare that feeling has become in your daily life. The world feels loud lately. Demanding. This pill made it quiet without asking you to disappear completely. That's when the idea forms. Not a plan, not a craving, just a possibility. Maybe again sometime. You don't say it out loud. You don't need to. Your brain files it away in the same place it keeps restaurant recommendations and phone numbers, useful. Optional information. That night, you don't take anything. You tell yourself this matters. That restraint proves something. You lie in bed waiting for sleep to arrive naturally. It does. Eventually. But it's thinner. Restless. You wake once or twice for no clear reason. In the morning, the contrast is noticeable. You're more alert. Yes, but also more tense. Shoulders tight. Jaw clenched. The quiet from the other night lingers in comparison. This is the strange part historians often point out in retrospect. The drug doesn't just add a sensation, it reframes the baseline. After calm has been chemically introduced, normal life starts to feel unnecessarily sharp. Historians still debate whether this reframing was more dangerous than the drug's physical effects themselves. Standing at your sink, staring into a mirror that feels slightly judgmental, you can already feel the comparison forming. A few days later, the opportunity presents itself again. Different apartment, different people, same pill. This time, there's less ceremony. No hesitation. You've done this before. You know how it goes. You swallow it with practiced casualness. Like someone who's learned a neat trick and doesn't feel the need to announce it. The effect arrives faster. Not stronger, just quicker. Your body recognizes the signal now. Muscles loosen almost immediately. Thoughts stretch. You sink into the couch with a familiarity that feels almost professional. That's joke number 2. You feel like a seasoned expert after exactly one prior experience. Conversation floats past you in soft layers. You contribute occasionally, proud of how relaxed you sound. Inside, you feel quietly accomplished. You found a switch. You didn't know there was a switch. But now that you do, it feels wasteful not to use it. Here's a lesser-known fact that often surprises people. Many early Quaalude users didn't increase dosage quickly. What increased first was frequency. The pill became a reliable punctuation mark, something that signaled the end of effort. Workday over. Tension off. This pattern wasn't considered addiction at the time. It was considered lifestyle management. You notice that people around you don't treat this behavior as remarkable. No hushed warnings. No concerned looks. Someone even jokes that it's better than drinking because you don't feel hungover in the same way. That's joke number 3. And it lands easily. Alcohol feels messy. This feels tidy. Over the next few weeks, Quaaludes slide into your life with impressive subtlety. Not every night, just the nights that matter. Social nights, stressful nights, nights when sleep feels too far away to negotiate with politely. You keep track, loosely. You're still in control. You're choosing when. That's important to you. Your body, meanwhile, keeps learning. Each dose leaves a faint imprint, like a pencil mark pressed too hard to erase fully. The calm comes, but it doesn't stay as long as it did the first time. You notice this, but you don't worry about it. Nothing works perfectly forever. That's just how things are. What you don't notice, what you couldn't notice yet, is how quickly your definition of normal is shifting. Nights without the pill start to feel incomplete. Not bad, just unfinished. Like stopping a movie 10 minutes early and pretending you got the full story. As you drift into another sedated evening, limbs heavy and thoughts slow, a quiet certainty settles in. This isn't dangerous. It's useful. It fits. Historians still debate when casual use crosses into dependency. Lying there, staring at a ceiling that feels unusually far away, you'd say that line is obvious. You just haven't reached it yet. At least, that's what it feels like, for now. By the time you notice the pattern, it already feels established enough to defend itself. Quaaludes aren't something you do anymore. They're something you wear, like flared jeans or tinted glasses. They become part of how you show up. A look, a vibe, a soft signal to the room that you're relaxed, unbothered, tuned to the right frequency. In the late 70s, this matters. Image is currency. Being visibly calm, almost slow, reads as confidence. You're not frantic. You're not trying too hard. You lean instead of stand. You listen instead of interrupt. People describe you as chill, which feels flattering, even if you're not entirely sure what it means. That's joke number 1. Being praised for pharmaceutical side effects. You start timing your doses. Not in a spreadsheet way, more like instinctively. Too early and you miss the build. Too late and you're already tired. There's a sweet spot, and you're getting good at finding it. The pill becomes a prelude. A ritual that signals the shift from effort to ease. You don't rush it. Rushing ruins the aesthetic. This is where the drug blends seamlessly into the culture. Disco floors glow. Conversations stretch. Everything is slow enough to feel intentional. Quaaludes don't make you wild, they make you smooth. That's the appeal. You watch people around you move with the same delayed grace. And it feels communal, like you're all in on the same secret. A widely remembered historical truth sits quietly underneath all this. During this era, prescriptions are still common. Doctors hand them out with reassuring smiles. Sometimes with advice as vague as, don't overdo it. Overdoing it, however, is never clearly defined. Historians still debate whether medical culture underestimated the risks or simply prioritized immediate relief over long-term consequence. Either way, you're operating well within what looks normal. Here's the lesser-known detail most people miss. The social pressure doesn't push you to take more, it pushes you to appear a certain way. Too alert feels wrong. Too sharp feels out of place. Slowness becomes fashionable. You learn to lean into it, literally and figuratively. You start carrying pills with you, just in case, not because you plan to take them, but because not having the option feels oddly stressful. This doesn't ring any alarms in your head. Preparedness is responsible, right? That's joke number 2. calling contingency planning what it is. Conversations drift. You find yourself agreeing with things more often. Not because you're convinced, but because disagreement feels like work. Your opinions soften. Your reactions lag. You don't argue, you vibe. People like this about you. Or at least, they seem to. At work. If work is part of your life right now, you keep the pills out of sight. But not out of mind. You wouldn't take one before a meeting. That would be irresponsible. But you might take one the night before. Knowing the softness will bleed into the morning. You show up a little slower. A little foggier. But not enough to raise eyebrows. Productivity, after all, is measured by output, not presence. You notice something else, too. The calm you get from Quaaludes doesn't stack neatly on top of your natural emotions. It flattens them. Joy becomes contentment. Anxiety becomes background noise. Sadness becomes distant, like it's happening to someone else. This feels like improvement. Fewer extremes. Less friction. That's the sales pitch. Internalized. Historians still debate whether this emotional flattening was perceived as a benefit or a warning sign at the time. In your lived experience, it's simply practical. Life feels easier when it asks less of you. But the body, always honest in its quiet way, is adjusting again. The same dose doesn't carry you as far. You don't panic about this. You don't even label it tolerance yet. You just notice that the landing is shorter. That the softness fades sooner. You respond by spacing doses a little closer together. Maintenance, not escalation. That distinction feels important. There's laughter one night, real laughter, and you realize. A beat late, that you didn't quite feel it. You smiled. You made the sound. But the feeling itself arrived dulled. Like a radio station slightly out of tune. It doesn't bother you much. Feelings are overrated anyway. That's joke number 3. And it lands internally with a shrug. You also start noticing the physical cues. Speech slows more than you intend. Standing up requires a moment of planning. You develop a habit of bracing yourself subtly, hand on the wall, knee against the couch, so it looks casual. You tell yourself you're just being careful. Careful is good. Friends tease you lightly. You move like you're underwater. Someone says, you grin, exaggerated and slow, playing into it. The comment is meant affectionately. No one's worried. Worry would ruin the mood. The nights blend together now. Not in blackouts. Those come later, but in soft overlaps. You remember impressions instead of sequences. The color of lights. The weight of music. The way time stretches when nothing feels urgent. Mornings become an afterthought. You wake, function, wait for night. Here's another historical marker sliding quietly into place. By the late 1970s, whispers about dependency are starting to circulate. Nothing official yet. No panic. Just articles, conversations, murmurs. You hear them, but they feel distant. Those stories are about other people. People who overdid it. You're refined, controlled, aesthetic. As you swallow another pill one evening, without ceremony or reflection, you realize something important, not with fear, but with mild annoyance. You don't feel like yourself without it anymore. Not bad, just incomplete, like forgetting a watch or leaving the house without keys. That realization passes quickly, smoothed over by the familiar descent into calm. Your body settles, your thoughts stretch, the world dims politely. You tell yourself this is just the era, the culture, the look. And for now, the era agrees with you. It's still early. You're still floating. And floating, you decide, is better than sinking, especially when the floor hasn't appeared yet. Your body figures it out before your mind does. That's usually how these things go. You wake up one morning after a night without Quaaludes and feel off. Not sick, not panicked, just slightly misaligned, like a shopping cart with one wheel that refuses to behave. You tell yourself it's nothing: bad sleep, bad coffee, bad mood, the holy trinity of modern excuses. But the feeling lingers. Your shoulders sit higher than usual. Your jaw clenches without asking permission. Sounds feel sharper. People talk too fast. Everything feels like it's moving at the wrong speed. And for the first time, you are the one lagging behind. That soft, underwater feeling you've grown accustomed to? It's gone, replaced by a low-level static that hums under your thoughts. That night, you take a pill, not because you planned to, but because the decision feels obvious. Necessary. Even. The calm returns quickly, like a well-trained dog responding to its name. Your muscles loosen, your breath deepens, the static fades, relief washes over you, disproportionate and immediate. You don't label this moment yet. You don't call it tolerance or dependence. You call it working. That's joke number 1, confusing relief with success. This is where your body starts negotiating terms. The same dose still works. Technically. But the effect doesn't last as long. The arc is shorter. The landing less plush. You don't mind at first. Nothing stays perfect forever. That's just life. You've accepted that. Very mature of you. Really. So you adjust. A little earlier in the evening. A little closer together. You don't double the dose. You're not reckless. You're just maintaining the experience you already know how to manage. This distinction matters to you. Escalation sounds dramatic. Maintenance sounds responsible. Historically, this phase rarely made headlines. It wasn't overdoses or arrests, it was quiet adaptation. Many users in the 1970s described this period as the sweet spot, when the drug still felt controllable but had become quietly essential. Historians still debate whether this stage was more dangerous than later excess, because it disguised itself so well as normal behavior. You notice physical changes, subtle but undeniable. Standing up requires a pause. Not a stumble, just a moment. Speech slurs occasionally, but you learn to slow it deliberately. Turning impairment into affectation. People think you're being thoughtful. That's joke number 2, mistaking delayed processing for wisdom. Sleep changes too. When you take Quaaludes, you fall asleep quickly. But you wake feeling oddly unrested. Like you skipped the deep parts. When you don't take them, sleep resists you entirely. You toss. You stare. Your mind races in a way that feels unfamiliar and rude. Sedation, you realize, isn't the same thing as rest, but it's close enough that you don't push the thought any further. Here's a lesser-known fact that tends to surprise people looking back. Quaaludes didn't just affect sleep and mood. They altered motor coordination significantly. Even at doses users considered normal. Many accidents attributed to clumsiness or bad luck were quietly chemical in origin. You don't connect those dots yet. But you do notice the bruises. The unexplained knocks against furniture. You laugh them off. Everyone does. One night, you spill a drink and don't react right away. The delay is noticeable. Someone jokes that you're moving in slow motion. You exaggerate the slowness, bowing theatrically. Laughter follows. That's joke number 3, turning impairment into performance. Inside, though, a small recalibration is happening. You start planning your evenings around access. Not obsessively, just strategically. If you're going out, you make sure you're stocked. If you're traveling, you pack carefully. The idea of running out doesn't terrify you, but it does irritate you. Inconvenience is the emotion that sneaks in first. By the late 1970s, another historical shift is quietly unfolding alongside your personal one. Doctors are beginning to notice patterns. Prescriptions are still common, but murmurs of concern are growing louder. Some clinics tighten guidelines. Some doctors ask more questions. Nothing dramatic yet, just friction where there wasn't any before. You hear about this secondhand. Someone mentions their doctor being weird about refills. Someone else shrugs it off. There are always ways around mild inconvenience. You don't feel threatened. You feel mildly annoyed, like a customer encountering new store policies. The calm still comes when you take the pill. That hasn't changed, but it feels more like correction now than discovery. You're not reaching for a new state. You're restoring a previous one. That difference matters, even if you don't articulate it yet. On nights without it, you're more irritable than you remember being. Little things get under your skin. Noise, light, people chewing. You blame stress, work, the world. It couldn't possibly be the absence of something you're not dependent on. That logic satisfies you, for now. Historians still debate the exact moment casual use became cultural dependence during this era. Was it regulation, marketing, social normalization, or simply the human tendency to repeat what works? Sitting on your couch, pill dissolving quietly inside you. The question feels abstract. All you know is this: life without the drug feels louder than it used to. Life with it feels manageable. And manageability, you decide, is a perfectly reasonable goal. So you lean back. You let the heaviness settle in. You allow the edges to blur again. The body relaxes. The mind slows. The world dims politely. And somewhere beneath that calm, your nervous system makes another note. Not dramatic, not alarming, just practical. This is the new baseline. You don't panic. You adjust. Mornings become negotiations, not arguments. Those require too much energy, but quiet. Internal bargaining sessions where you weigh how you feel against how you're supposed to feel. You wake up heavy, not exactly tired, not exactly rested, just slowed. Like your body is still buffering while the day insists on starting anyway. You sit on the edge of the bed longer than you used to. Feet on the floor, hands resting on your knees, staring at nothing in particular. This pause isn't dramatic, it's practical. Standing up too fast now feels like an unnecessary gamble. That's joke number 1. Treating gravity like it's out to get you. The fog from the night before doesn't fully lift. It thins, sure, but it never disappears. Your thoughts line up instead of racing, which feels like an improvement until you realize they're also less curious. Less sharp. Ideas arrive slower and leave sooner. Like guests who stop by politely but don't stay for dinner. In the 1970s, this state had a name people didn't say out loud: hangover. Though not in the alcohol sense. Quaalude users often described mornings as soft but useless. You're functional, technically, but enthusiasm is missing. Motivation feels theoretical. Historians still debate whether this was chemical aftereffect or early neurological adaptation. From your side of the mirror, it just feels like how mornings are now. You shower longer, letting the water do some of the work your nervous system won't. Warmth helps. It always does. You dress carefully, choosing clothes that don't demand too much coordination. Buttons become optional when possible. You tell yourself it's a style choice. That's joke number 2, calling convenience fashion. At work, or wherever responsibility lives in your life, you pass as normal. This is the unsettling part. You show up. You speak when spoken to. You complete tasks. No one pulls you aside with concern. No one asks if you're okay. The drug hasn't made you unreliable yet. It's made you average. Quietly, efficiently average. Here's a lesser-known historical detail that matters more than it should. During this era, many workplaces had no real framework for identifying sedative impairment. Slurred speech and stumbling were obvious red flags. Mild cognitive dulling was not. You fit comfortably under the radar, which reinforces the idea that nothing is wrong. But you notice the difference. You forget small things, names, appointments, where you set things down. Not enough to cause trouble. Just enough to be annoying. You start writing more notes, making lists, externalizing memory because internal recall feels slower than it used to be. Around midday, something interesting happens. The fog lifts just enough that the contrast becomes clear. You remember how last night felt. How smooth everything became. How easy it was to exist without friction. The memory doesn't spark craving exactly, it sparks comparison. And comparison quietly rewrites expectations. By afternoon, you're tired again. Not from effort. From being awake. Your body feels like it's missing a gear. Coffee helps less than it used to. You consider how early is too early to start thinking about tonight. The answer shifts subtly earlier than yesterday. That evening, you don't hesitate. The pill feels earned. You've made it through the day. You deserve the soft landing. You swallow it without ceremony. Like brushing your teeth or locking the door. Routine is comforting. That's joke number 3, calling chemical sedation self-care. The effect arrives smoothly, predictably. Your shoulders drop. Your thoughts lengthen. The day recedes without complaint. You don't think about consequences. You think about relief. Relief is persuasive like that. Sleep comes quickly again, but it's still not real sleep. You don't dream, or if you do, you don't remember. You wake the next morning in the same managed state, negotiating again with gravity, light, and sound. And somewhere in this repeating loop, another shift locks into place. You stop asking why you feel this way. You start asking how to make it stop. Historians still debate when casual use becomes routine dependency, whether it's marked by dosage, frequency, or mindset. Sitting on the edge of your bed, blinking into another soft, unconvincing morning, you suspect it's marked by something simpler. You don't remember what mornings felt like before this. And that absence, quiet and unremarkable, is doing more work than the drug ever could. Mixing starts the way most bad ideas do, without ceremony. Without a decision you'd recognize as important later. It happens at a party where the music is a little louder than usual and the drinks are poured with a generous hand. Someone hands you a glass before you finish the thought of refusing it. And you accept because refusing feels like effort. You've already taken your pill. This detail doesn't alarm you. In fact, it barely registers. Alcohol has always been part of the background, social, expected, decorative. Quaaludes, too, have become familiar. Your mind doesn't flag the combination as dangerous. It flags it as efficient. Two paths to the same destination, converging politely. Historically, this was one of the most common and least discussed behaviors of the era. Quaaludes and alcohol overlapped constantly in social settings, often without explicit warnings. The interaction was known in medical circles, but public awareness lagged behind cultural practice. Historians still debate whether this gap was ignorance or convenience. Holding your drink, smiling too slowly at a joke you didn't quite hear. It feels like neither. It feels normal. The effect arrives differently this time. Not stronger exactly, just deeper. Your limbs feel heavier sooner. Your balance becomes less cooperative. The room doesn't spin, it tilts. Gently, like someone adjusted the horizon for aesthetic reasons. You sit down without remembering deciding to. Conversation becomes harder to track. Words stretch and smear together. You laugh at the wrong moments. Then compensate by laughing longer, hoping it covers the delay. That's joke number 1, using duration as camouflage. Someone asks if you're okay. You nod. The nod takes a moment to complete. You notice this, vaguely, and decide to sit still. Sitting feels safer. Safer than standing. Safer than walking. Safer than trusting your legs with gravity and intent at the same time. Here's a lesser-known fact that rarely made it into casual conversation at the time. Quaaludes and alcohol both depress the central nervous system. And together they don't just add their effects, they multiply them. Reaction time slows dramatically. Coordination drops. Breathing becomes less responsive. None of this feels urgent in the moment. That's part of the problem. You sip your drink because it's there. Because sipping feels like participation. Because not sipping would invite questions. You don't taste it much. Taste has faded into texture now. Cold, wet, vaguely sweet. Your body accepts it without comment. Like it's already too busy managing other things. Time fractures. Not blackouts yet. Those come later, but gaps form. You remember sitting, then standing, then sitting again. You don't remember moving between those states. The transitions vanish like jump cuts in a poorly edited film. That's joke number 2, calling your memory cinematic. At some point, you attempt to walk across the room. This is ambitious. You make it halfway and forget why you stood up in the first place. You stop, steady yourself on the back of a chair, and decide that this is where you live now. The chair accepts you. People around you are moving too fast, dancing too energetically, existing at a tempo you can't match. You feel oddly detached, like you're watching through glass. This doesn't scare you. It feels cushioned, protected, like nothing sharp can reach you from here. You don't notice how shallow your breathing has become. You don't notice how long you've been sitting without moving. You don't notice the concern in someone else's voice when they mention water, or air, or getting you home. You're not asleep. You're not unconscious. You're just very far away. Historically, Many early Quaalude-related emergencies weren't overdoses in the dramatic sense. They were accidents, falls, aspiration, loss of coordination leading to injury. People underestimated the compound effect because each substance felt manageable on its own. Historians still debate how many incidents were misattributed to drinking too much, when the chemistry was more complex. Eventually, you're guided somewhere quieter. A couch, a back room, a ride home you don't quite remember agreeing to. You're grateful, but you don't express it clearly. Words feel unnecessary. Everything feels slow and padded. Sleep that night is heavy and strange. You don't drift, you drop. There are no dreams. There's no sense of time passing. Morning arrives abruptly, like someone flipped a switch you weren't prepared for. You wake with a headache that feels dense rather than sharp. Your mouth is dry. Your body feels wrong in a way that's difficult to describe. Not sick, not injured, just compromised, like a machine that ran overnight without coolant. It takes you longer to piece together the night before. The gaps bother you more than the discomfort. You replay fragments, trying to stitch them into a sequence. The stitching fails. Too much is missing. You tell yourself it was just a little too much fun. A one-off. Mixing happens. Everyone does it. That's joke number 3, normalizing risk by volume. But later that day, something sticks with you. Not fear. Not regret. Just a quiet, nagging awareness that the drug behaves differently when you invite alcohol into the room. The calm is deeper. The control is thinner. The margin is smaller. You don't swear it off. You don't set rules. You just make a mental note. And mental notes, as you're slowly learning, are easy to overwrite, especially when the evening comes. The lights dim, and relief once again feels like something you deserve. The nights don't end cleanly anymore. They smear. You wake up with impressions instead of memories, colors without shapes. Laughter without context. Music without melody. It's like waking up after falling asleep in front of the television and realizing the show changed 3 times while you weren't looking. You piece together what you can. A couch. A hallway. Someone's voice saying your name like a question. The rest is gone. Edited out by chemistry. This isn't a blackout in the dramatic sense, no collapse. No flashing lights. It's quieter than that. Politer. Your brain simply decides certain moments aren't worth keeping. At first, you find this amusing. Must have been a good night. You say, shrugging it off. That's joke number 1. Measuring quality by missing data. People laugh along. Missing memories still sound like fun when you don't yet know what they're costing you. By the late 1970s, this phenomenon is becoming more common than anyone admits. Quaaludes are still widely used, still treated as mellow and manageable. But emergency rooms are quietly noticing a pattern. People arriving confused, injured, or just blank. A well-known historical shift is underway. Accident reports start climbing, especially on weekends. What's less known is how often those accidents come with partial amnesia rather than total unconsciousness. You were there. You just weren't recording. You start noticing the gaps more clearly now because they're interrupting your stories. Someone references something you said, something you did. You smile, nod, pretend you remember. You don't. Pretending takes practice. But you're getting good at it. That's joke number 2, developing improv skills you never wanted. The sensory details of nights remain vivid. Even as the sequence dissolves, you remember the way lights look too soft to be real. The way music seems to come from inside your chest rather than speakers. The way time stretches and then snaps back without warning. These fragments are seductive. They make the gaps feel like artistic choices rather than malfunctions. Here's a lesser-known fact that complicates things. Quaaludes don't just impair memory formation. They can selectively disrupt it. Emotional impressions stick while chronological order evaporates. That's why you remember how the night felt but not what happened. Your brain keeps the mood and drops the map. You tell yourself this isn't dangerous. It's just incomplete documentation. Everyone forgets things. You're not losing entire nights, just trimming the edges. That framing makes it easier to keep going. At work, the effects show up subtly. Someone mentions a conversation you had yesterday afternoon, and you need a second too long to place it. You recover, but the delay lingers like a smudge. You start keeping your calendar closer, writing more notes. Externalizing memory feels practical, not alarming. The culture around you still treats all this as harmless. Disco clubs thrive. Prescription bottles rattle in pockets. Late nights blur into early mornings across entire cities. This is the historical event humming beneath your personal story. The normalization of pharmaceutical leisure. Sedation isn't a secret anymore, it's a shared rhythm. Historians still debate whether this cultural embrace was driven more by stress, marketing, or simple novelty. From where you're standing, or sitting, or leaning, it feels like a collective shrug. Everyone's tired. Everyone wants the edges softened. You're just participating. One night, you wake up somewhere unfamiliar. Not alarming unfamiliar, just inconvenient. You recognize the furniture but not the path you took to get there. You sit up slowly, letting the room come into focus. Your clothes are intact. Nothing hurts. Relief arrives first, followed closely by confusion. You reconstruct the night like a detective with only the closing scene. A party, a drink, a pill, another drink, then static. You laugh quietly at yourself. Guess I really checked out. You mutter. That's joke number 3, treating absence like a vacation. But something about this one sticks. Not fear, just discomfort. You don't like not knowing how you got here. You don't like the idea that your body can travel without your mind keeping pace. It's not dramatic. It's just unsettling. Like discovering your watch has been running without you noticing. The next evening, you plan to be careful. You space things out. You drink water. You tell yourself you're in control. And for a while, it works. You feel the familiar softness without losing the thread. You congratulate yourself internally. See? Management. Then someone tops off your glass without asking. You don't stop them. Stopping would be awkward. Awkwardness is effort. Effort is what you're trying to avoid. The evening slides again, smooth and slow, until it doesn't. You wake the next morning with a bruise you don't remember earning. It's small, nothing dramatic. Your arm, maybe. You turn it over, examining the colors like a weather report. No pain, just evidence. This is another historical reality that rarely makes the highlight reels. The injuries that accumulate quietly. Falls blamed on clumsiness. Burns explained away as accidents. Historians still debate how many of these incidents were chemically assisted without being chemically acknowledged. You go about your day with a mild headache and a heavier sense of something being off. The gaps are getting wider. The edit's more aggressive. You find yourself asking other people what happened last night more often, framing it as curiosity, not concern. They fill in the blanks casually. You said this. You did that. You laughed. You sat down for a long time. Nothing alarming. They assure you. Nothing unusual. Their tone convinces you more than the details. As evening approaches, the familiar restlessness returns. The day feels too sharp, too loud. You want the softening, the smoothing. You want to slide back into the version of yourself that doesn't mind not remembering everything. You hesitate for half a second longer than usual before taking the pill. Not enough to stop. Just enough to notice. The calm arrives. Right on cue. Your shoulders drop. Your thoughts stretch. The room warms politely. Relief settles in like a well-practiced routine. But beneath it, something else has changed. You're no longer surprised by the missing pieces. You're starting to expect them. And expectation, as history quietly warns, is often the moment when accidents stop feeling accidental and start feeling inevitable. Intimacy slows down in ways you don't notice right away. Not because desire disappears, but because timing does. Touch arrives late, responses lag, everything feels padded, as if there's a thin layer of foam between you and the moment itself. You're present, technically, but slightly delayed. Like a satellite feed that's always a second behind. At first, this feels kind of luxurious. There's no rush, no sharp edges. Movements stretch. Conversations trail off without awkwardness. In a decade obsessed with mood and atmosphere, this slowness fits right in. You tell yourself it's deeper, more relaxed, more mature. That's joke number one, calling chemical sedation emotional intelligence. But something subtle shifts. You notice it in the pauses. The way eye contact drifts. The way consent becomes less verbal, more assumed. No one says no. No one says yes very clearly either. Everything just happens, or doesn't, and later, remembering exactly how it unfolded feels strangely difficult. This is one of those uncomfortable historical footnotes that doesn't get much airtime. Quaaludes were deeply entangled with sexual culture in the 1970s. Often framed as enhancers of closeness and ease. What's less discussed is how their sedative effects blurred boundaries, not just physically, but cognitively. Historians still debate whether this era underestimated how much slowed processing could complicate agency. Sitting here, replaying fragments of a night you half remember, the question feels less theoretical. You find yourself agreeing more than deciding, going along instead of choosing. It doesn't feel coercive, it feels passive, like floating downstream instead of steering. That passivity is comfortable, which makes it dangerous in a way that's hard to articulate without sounding dramatic. The next morning, you try to reconstruct the night. Not out of fear, out of curiosity. Who initiated what? When did you leave? Did you want to? The answers come back fuzzy. Not missing entirely. Just softened enough to resist clarity. You shrug it off. Everyone forgets details. That's joke number two, confusing memory loss with mystery. Friends talk about the night like it was smooth, mellow, uneventful. That's reassuring. Uneventful sounds safe, but the reassurance doesn't quite settle. Something about being told everything was fine instead of knowing it was fine leaves a residue of unease. During the day, your body feels heavy again. That familiar managed state settling in. You go through motions. You smile at the right times. You nod. You function. Underneath, a question hums quietly. How much of last night was me? And how much was the drug? You don't dwell on it. Dwelling sharpens things. You've learned to prefer soft edges. That evening, the pattern repeats. Pill. Drink. Slowness. Someone's hand on your arm. Warm and grounding. You respond, but the response feels pre-programmed. Like muscle memory filling in where intention should be. It's not unpleasant. It's just detached. Here's a lesser-known detail that adds weight to this moment. Quaaludes significantly reduce inhibition while also dulling awareness. That combination doesn't create desire, it removes friction. Historians still debate whether this was misunderstood as liberation at the time or quietly exploited. From inside the experience, it just feels like things happen without needing much input from you. You laugh when someone jokes about how chill you are lately. Nothing phases you, they say. You smile. Slow and easy. That's joke number 3. Being praised for not reacting. But later, alone, you feel something like absence. Not loneliness. More like a hollow where clarity used to live. You realize you can't remember the last time you felt sharply present with someone. Everything has been filtered, softened, delayed. Sleep comes, heavy and dreamless. Morning follows with the familiar fog. Another day managed rather than lived. As you sit with coffee, staring out a window you don't quite see, a thought drifts through you, not panic, not regret, just observation. You're participating in your own life more than directing it now. The drug doesn't push you into danger. It simply slows you enough that danger can wander in without being noticed. And that, you're starting to realize, might be worse. Daylight used to feel like a reset. Now it feels like a continuation. The same heaviness from the night before drapes itself over your morning. Only this time it's expected. You don't question it anymore. You plan around it. Alarm rings. You silence it without annoyance. And you lie still for a few extra seconds, letting your body catch up to the idea of being awake. You tell yourself you're functional. And you are. Technically. You shower. You dress. You leave the house. The motions still line up in the correct order. Which feels like proof. But something is missing in the middle, urgency. Maybe. Or purpose. You don't move toward the day so much as allow yourself to be carried into it. This is how the drug slips into daylight. Not dramatically. Not recklessly. You don't wake up and swallow a pill before breakfast. That would feel like crossing a line. Instead, the effects of last night linger just enough to smooth the edges off the morning. You're slower, but calmer. Foggy, but unbothered. It feels like a fair trade. By the late 1970s, this wasn't unusual. Plenty of people moved through their days under the soft afterglow of sedatives taken the night before. It didn't look like impairment. It looked like being laid back. Historians still debate how much of this era's workplace culture quietly accommodated chemical dulling because it didn't disrupt productivity in obvious ways. From your desk, or counter, or workbench, it just feels like normal now. You notice it first in your posture. You sit more, lean more. Standing for long stretches feels unnecessary. Your movements are economical, careful, as if you're subconsciously conserving something. Energy, maybe, or attention. You speak less in meetings. But when you do, People listen. Your pause is read as thoughtfulness. That's joke number 1, mistaking delay for depth. Inside, though, there's a strange hollowness. You complete tasks, but the satisfaction doesn't arrive. Finishing something feels no different than starting it. Everything exists on the same emotional plane, flat, manageable, dull. You tell yourself this is adulthood. That excitement is for younger people. Or for weekends. That story helps for a while. Around midday, you realize you're tired again. Not physically exhausted, just mentally padded. You stare at something for longer than necessary. Lose your place mid-thought. Recover quickly enough that no one comments. These are micro moments, easy to dismiss, but they accumulate like dust. Here's a lesser-known fact that fits uncomfortably well. Sedative hypnotics like Quaaludes don't just slow reaction time, they reduce sustained attention. You can focus briefly, but holding that focus feels harder. Tasks stretch longer than they should. You compensate by doing less at once, which feels like efficiency but is actually limitation. You make it through the day by leaning on routine. Routine doesn't ask questions. It doesn't demand creativity. It just moves forward, step by predictable step. You're grateful for that. The day ends without incident. And that feels like success. As evening approaches, a familiar restlessness stirs, not anxiety. Exactly, but discomfort with sharpness. The world feels too loud again. Too bright. You want the soft filter back. You tell yourself you'll wait. You've already taken enough lately. Spacing it out feels responsible. You make it an hour. Then you make a decision that doesn't feel like a decision at all. Just a return to equilibrium. You swallow the pill, settle into the couch, and feel the world lower its voice again. Relief comes quickly, like slipping into a familiar jacket. That's joke number 2, calling chemical correction comfort. The night unfolds quietly. No drama, no accidents, no gaps big enough to notice. You feel good about that. See? Balance. Control. You're learning to manage this. But later, as you drift towards sleep, a thought floats up gently, without accusation. You didn't choose to bring the drug into your workday. It just followed you there. And now, as the lines between night and day soften, you realize something important. You're no longer using Quaaludes to escape life. You're using them to make life tolerable. Historians still debate when that shift happens, whether it's marked by dosage, dependence, or psychology. Lying there, eyes half closed, you suspect it's marked by something quieter. You don't feel high anymore. You just feel normal when the drug is present, and slightly off when it isn't. Morning will come again soon, padded and manageable. And you'll tell yourself, once more, that this is just how things are now. The law doesn't arrive with sirens. It never does at first. It arrives as a rumor. A shift in tone. A pause where there used to be a signature. You hear about it the way you hear about weather changes, secondhand. Vaguely. With just enough detail to sound real but not enough to change your plans. Someone mentions their doctor is being weird about refills. Another says pharmacies are asking more questions. You listen, nodding, unconcerned. Systems are always adjusting. That's what systems do. They tighten a bolt here, loosen one there. You've learned not to read meaning into friction. By the late 1970s, though, something is happening beneath the surface. Regulators are paying attention. Emergency room statistics are climbing. Accident reports are stacking up. This is the historical event that unfolds quietly in your peripheral vision, scrutiny. Quaaludes are no longer just a mellow accessory. They're becoming a problem someone has to manage. Historians still debate whether these early regulatory shifts were driven by genuine concern or public image. From where you're sitting, leaned back, comfortable, slowed, the distinction doesn't feel urgent. Nothing has changed for you yet. Your nights still soften on schedule. Your mornings still drag but function. The machine still runs. Then your refill takes longer than usual. It's not denied, just delayed. A phone call instead of a slip of paper. A question about dosage. A suggestion, casual, polite, that you try to cut back. You agree immediately. Agreement is easy when it doesn't require follow-through. That's joke number 1, nodding your way through a problem. You leave with the same bottle. But the encounter lingers. It's the first time someone official has suggested that this thing you rely on might be optional. The idea feels insulting more than alarming. Optional implies excess. Excess implies judgment. At home, you line the pills up on the table. Counting without counting. You tell yourself you'll space them out. You tell yourself this matters. And then the evening arrives. Sharp and loud as ever. And you take one because you always do. Planning feels noble. Relief feels necessary. The calm arrives. But it's thinner tonight. Or maybe you're noticing it more. Either way, the margin feels smaller. You add a drink, just one, to smooth the edge. The combination deepens the softness. But it also shortens it. You feel the floor sooner. You adjust by sitting down. Here's a lesser-known detail that fits this moment uncomfortably well, as regulations tightened. Dosage recommendations changed, but users' bodies didn't reset. Tolerance doesn't care about policy. Historians still debate how many people increased use simply to maintain a feeling that used to come easily. Watching your own evening compress. You suspect the answer is more than anyone admitted. A few weeks pass. Refills become smaller. Conversations longer. You learn the phrases, new guidelines, best practices, just being careful. You repeat them back. Cooperative and calm. Cooperation is a skill you've perfected. It gets you what you need most of the time. But not always. One afternoon, the answer changes. Not dramatically. Just enough. No refill today. Maybe next week. Maybe try something else. The words land gently and still manage to knock the wind out of you. You keep your face neutral. You thank the doctor. You leave. In the car, you sit for a moment longer than necessary. Hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. This isn't panic. It's logistics. You start calculating how many pills left, how many nights they'll cover, how carefully you'll have to plan. The math feels intrusive, like someone else's problem suddenly handed to you. That night, you take a pill more deliberately than usual. You notice the chalky taste, the time it takes to dissolve, the way your body leans forward to meet the effect. That's joke number 2, calling awareness mindfulness. The calm comes, but it's threaded with something new. Tension. Not enough to ruin it. Just enough to notice. You don't sleep as deeply. You wake earlier than you want to. Heart ticking a little faster than usual. Morning arrives sharp again, less padded than you've grown accustomed to. The next day, you feel irritable in a way you haven't felt in a long time. Small noises grate. Conversations feel demanding. Your shoulders refuse to relax. You tell yourself it's just stress. Of course it is. The world has been stressful lately. Everyone says so. But the thought of evening carries a new weight now. Not anticipation, calculation. You count pills again. You rearrange plans. You decide which nights matter more than others. This is still control. You tell yourself. Just a different kind. By this point in the decade, the shift is undeniable. The culture is changing its mind. Articles appear. Jokes turn sharper. The word dangerous starts hovering near conversations where it never used to live. Historians still debate whether the speed of this change helped anyone or simply pushed youths into darker corners. From your couch, pill dissolving, it feels like the room got smaller. A friend mentions buying extras, just in case. Another talks about switching brands. Pills with different stamps, different textures. You listen closely now. Information feels valuable in a way it didn't before. That's joke number 3, calling supply management a hobby. You tell yourself you're fine. You're not shaking. You're not desperate. You're just adjusting to new circumstances. Anyone would. The calm still comes when you take the pill. The world still dims politely. You're still you. But something has shifted in the background. The drug used to feel like an accessory. Now it feels like infrastructure. You don't say that out loud. You don't even think it clearly. You just feel it in the way evenings have started to revolve around availability instead of desire. The law hasn't touched you yet. Doctors haven't shut the door. Nothing dramatic has happened. But the edges are tightening. And as history quietly proves, tightening edges have a way of pushing people inward, toward choices they never thought they'd have to make. Tonight, you take your pill and let the softness return. Thinner but familiar. You tell yourself you'll figure this out. You always do. The decade is changing. And whether you like it or not, your relationship with this little white pill is about to change with it. The pills don't look the same anymore. You notice it casually at first. The way you notice a change in packaging at the grocery store. Different imprint, slightly different color, same size, roughly, close enough that your brain accepts it without protest. These are basically the same. Someone tells you, shrugging, just from a different place. Different place is doing a lot of work in that sentence. This is the moment when supply quietly steps out of the daylight. Not dramatically, no trench codes. No whispered passwords. Just a friend of a friend. A new contact. A bottle without a pharmacy label. The transition feels smoother than it should. You don't feel like you've crossed a line. You feel like the line moved while you weren't looking. Historically, this shift happens fast. As prescriptions tighten, demand doesn't disappear, it reroutes. Street supply begins to fill the gap. Unevenly and imperfectly. Pills circulate with familiar names but unfamiliar origins. Historians still debate whether prohibition accelerated harm by fragmenting quality control. Sitting on your couch, rolling the pill between your fingers. The debate feels less theoretical. You take it. The effect arrives, but not quite the way you expect. It's slower to start, then heavier when it lands. Your limbs feel more weighted. Your thoughts more syrupy. You sink deeper than planned. Like missing a step on the stairs and landing a little too hard. You tell yourself it's just a strong one. Potency varies. That happens. That's joke number 1, calling unpredictability variety. The next morning, the fog is thicker, not unmanageable, but stubborn. Coffee barely scratches it. Your mouth feels dry in a way that suggests dehydration without thirst. Your balance is off longer than usual. You move carefully, aware that your body feels less cooperative than it did last week. You don't panic, you adjust. Over the next few nights, you try another pill from the same batch. Then another. The effects vary wildly. One night, barely anything. Another, you're glued to the couch, blinking slowly at a wall you didn't mean to stare at for 20 minutes. The inconsistency is unsettling, but it doesn't stop you. It just makes you more cautious, or at least, you think it does. Here's a lesser-known fact that becomes painfully relevant. Underground Quaalude production often lacked standardized dosing. Pills could contain wildly different amounts of active ingredient, or different depressants entirely. Historians still debate how many users were aware of this risk versus how many chose not to think about it. You fall firmly into the second category. Thinking costs energy. You start adjusting by feel. Half a pill, then another half later. You're experimenting, but you don't frame it that way. You frame it as fine-tuning. Control is important to you. You want to believe you still have it. One night, the pill hits harder than expected. Much harder. Your vision narrows. Sounds stretch. Standing feels impossible. You sit down quickly. Heart thudding, not from fear, but from effort. Breathing feels shallow, like your chest forgot part of the pattern. You focus on it deliberately, counting in your head. This passes. Slowly. Too slowly to be comfortable. But not slowly enough to trigger real alarm. You tell yourself you just misjudged. You drink some water. You don't take another pill that night. Restraint feels reassuring. That's joke number 2, calling survival a learning experience. The next day, your body feels bruised from the inside. Heavy. Off. You're irritable in a way that doesn't match the situation. Sounds scrape. Light and noise. Your hands tremble slightly when you hold them out. But only a little. You tell yourself it's caffeine, or sleep, or stress. You think about skipping tonight. You don't. Because by evening, the discomfort has sharpened into something less abstract. Restlessness, tightness, a buzzing under your skin that doesn't respond to distraction. The idea of not taking the pill feels louder than the idea of taking it. That calculation answers itself. The next dose smooths everything out again. Not perfectly, but enough. Relief arrives. Familiar and persuasive. You sink back, letting your muscles loosen. The lesson your body learns is immediate and efficient. This fixes that. Historians still debate when use becomes necessity, whether it's marked by quantity, frequency, or motivation. Lying there, breathing slowly, you suspect it's marked by relief that feels earned rather than chosen. Word spreads quickly in your circle. Which pills are good? Which batches to avoid? Who has something reliable this week? You listen more than you talk. Information has become a currency, and you don't want to spend it recklessly. There's a strange camaraderie in this phase. Shared warnings, shared jokes. Careful with the yellow ones. Someone says, laughing, they hit like a truck. That's joke number 3, using humor as a safety label. You laugh too, but you file the information away carefully. The nights are less predictable now. Some are smooth and quiet. Others feel like balancing on a narrow edge. One miscalculation away from something worse. You don't name that worse thing. Naming makes it real. Sleep becomes inconsistent. Sometimes you pass out instantly. Sometimes you hover, half aware, heart ticking strangely. Dreams fragmented and unpleasant. Morning fog thickens. Your body feels older than it should. You stretch more, move slower, recover less. And yet, you keep going. Because the alternative feels sharper, louder, harder to manage. The world without the pill no longer feels like neutral ground. It feels like withdrawal. You don't say that word. You don't need to. Your body already knows it. The dose creeps up without asking your permission. It doesn't announce itself as escalation. It presents itself as adjustment. A correction for inconsistency. A response to weaker pills. A way to smooth out evenings that have become unpredictably sharp around the edges. You don't double anything overnight. That would feel irresponsible. Instead, you add just a little. Half now, half later. One to start, another to finish the job. You tell yourself you're compensating for quality, not quantity. That distinction matters to you, even if it's mostly semantic. By this point, the ritual is automatic. Evening arrives, and your hand already knows where to go. You don't pause to reflect. Reflection takes clarity, and clarity is exactly what you're trying to avoid. That's joke number 1, calling avoidance relaxation. Historically, this period marked a quiet inflection point for many users. As legal supply vanished and street supply varied wildly, dosage became fluid. People didn't always take more because they wanted to. They took more because they were trying to hit a familiar feeling with unfamiliar tools. Historians still debate how much harm came from this instability alone. Sitting on your couch, experimenting with fractions, you feel the risk without fully acknowledging it. The body adapts again, faster this time. The calm still comes, but it settles less deeply. It wears off sooner. You notice yourself watching the clock more often, estimating when the softness will fade. That awareness changes the experience. The high becomes something to manage instead of something to enjoy. You add another half. The effect returns, but not cleanly. Your thoughts feel heavier, not slower. Speech becomes harder to organize. You abandon sentences halfway through because finishing them feels unnecessary. You don't mind. Silence has become comfortable. The next morning, the fog is thicker than ever. Your limbs feel weighted, like gravity has been recalibrated overnight. Standing up takes planning. You brace against walls without thinking about it. This is just how mornings are now. You don't compare them to before anymore. Comparison invites discomfort. Here's a lesser-known physiological detail that fits uncomfortably well. Increasing doses of sedatives don't just deepen sedation, they can fragment it, creating uneven suppression across brain systems. Coordination drops faster than awareness. Memory falters before consciousness does. You feel present, but your body disagrees. You notice the tremor first. Barely visible. Fingers buzzing slightly when you hold them out. You clench your fists to make it stop. It does. Mostly. You tell yourself it's caffeine. Or nerves. Or age catching up early. That's joke number 2, blaming time for chemistry. By afternoon, you're irritable again. The calm from the night before has evaporated, leaving behind a thin residue of restlessness. You find yourself snapping at small things, then immediately smoothing it over. Emotional regulation has become another task to manage. That evening, you consider waiting longer before dosing. You make it 20 minutes, maybe 30. The discomfort builds quietly, like pressure behind the eyes. Muscles tighten, sounds sharpen. You realize you're pacing without meaning to. You take the pill. Relief hits faster now. Too fast. The buzz under your skin smooths out immediately. Like flipping a switch. The contrast is stark enough to be unsettling. Your body didn't negotiate. It complied. That's joke number 3, calling obedience cooperation. The nights grow longer. Or maybe they just feel that way. You stay up later, chasing a steadiness that keeps slipping just out of reach. You don't feel euphoric anymore. You feel even, flat, neutral. The goal has shifted from pleasure to maintenance. Though you don't frame it that way yet. Sleep is unpredictable. Sometimes you drop into darkness instantly. Sometimes you hover, half aware, heart beating a little too loudly in your ears. Dreams, when they come, are disjointed and unpleasant. You wake with no memory of rest. By now, you're aware, dimly, defensively, that something has changed. Not overnight, gradually. Like erosion, the amount you take now would have flattened you months ago. Today, it barely gets you where you want to be. Historians still debate whether tolerance is a failure of the drug or a success of the body. Sitting there, counting pills by feel instead of sight, the answer feels personal. You don't want more. You just want enough. Enough quiet. Enough softness. Enough distance from the sharp parts of the day. The problem is, enough keeps moving. And each time it does, you follow. Not eagerly. Not recklessly. Just carefully enough to convince yourself you still know where you're going. But the path is narrowing. And the margins you used to rely on are almost gone. The accidents start arriving disguised as jokes. Not catastrophes, nothing that demands sirens or solemn voices, but small, inconvenient events that interrupt your day just long enough to be annoying. You trip over nothing in particular. You knock your elbow against a doorframe you've walked past 1,000 times. You drop things more often than you used to. Watching them fall with mild curiosity rather than urgency. Clumsy lately, you say, smiling. That's joke number 1, turning coordination loss into a personality trait. In the 1970s, this was common enough to be invisible. Emergency rooms quietly filled with people who hadn't overdosed, hadn't done anything dramatic. Just misjudged a step or nodded off at the wrong moment. Falls, burns, minor car accidents. Historians still debate how many of these incidents were chemically assisted without being chemically acknowledged. Sitting there with an ice pack balanced awkwardly on your knee. You don't feel like a statistic. You feel unlucky. The truth is, your reaction time has slowed more than you realize. Not enough to stop functioning, just enough to miss the margins. You reach for a glass and close your fingers a fraction too late. You step off a curb assuming your leg will keep up. Most of the time, it does. Sometimes, it doesn't. One afternoon, you nearly fall asleep in a chair that isn't meant for sleeping. Not dramatically, no head drop. No snore. Just a long blink that stretches too far. You startle yourself awake, heart racing, embarrassed for reasons you can't quite explain. You glance around to see if anyone noticed. They didn't, or they pretended not to. Either way, the moment passes. Here's a lesser-known detail that matters more now. Quaaludes significantly reduce muscle tone. That means your body doesn't brace the way it should when you stumble or fall. Injuries that would have been minor become bruises, sprains, cuts. You notice them accumulating, small marks in different stages of healing. Like a timeline you didn't consent to. At night, you laugh about it with friends. I should be wrapped in bubble wrap. You joke. That's joke number 2. Laughter follows. Humor works better than concern in this circle. Concern would slow things down. But alone, you notice how often you're sore now. How movement feels less confident. You sit down more. Stand up carefully. You plan your path through rooms, subconsciously avoiding obstacles. This feels like maturity, like learning your limits. The pills don't hit cleanly anymore. Some nights, you're too sedated too fast. Others, you hover in an unpleasant middle space, aware enough to notice discomfort, dulled enough to do nothing about it. You compensate by adjusting doses again, chasing balance like it's a moving target. One night, you misjudge, not drastically, just enough. You stand up too quickly and the room tilts hard. You reach for something that isn't there and end up on the floor. Surprised more than hurt, you sit there for a moment, breathing, taking inventory. Nothing broken, just pride. You laugh softly to yourself. That's joke number 3, laughing so you don't have to think. By morning, there's a bruise the size of a handprint blooming on your side. You don't remember earning it. You try to reconstruct the moment. But the memory dissolves when you touch it. You tell yourself it's fine. It looks worse than it feels. At work, you move more cautiously now. You lean when you can. Sit when possible. People comment on how relaxed you seem. You nod, accepting the compliment. They don't see the calculations running underneath, how you're constantly assessing stability, grip, timing. Historically, this phase is where many users insisted they were still in control. After all, they weren't chasing euphoria. They weren't seeking oblivion. They were managing, functioning. Historians still debate whether this belief delayed intervention or simply reflected the lack of alternatives at the time. From inside your body, it feels like realism. The evenings arrive heavier now. Not emotionally, physically. Your limbs feel weighed down before you even take anything. You wonder, briefly, whether the drug is still doing all the work, or if your body has learned the posture on its own. You take the pill anyway. Relief comes, but it's blunt. The softness feels thick, not smooth. You settle into a chair and decide not to move unless necessary. Movement feels optional now. Everything does. Sleep follows, irregular and shallow. You wake once or twice. Disoriented, unsure what time it is or why your heart is beating faster than it should. You calm yourself the way you've learned, by reminding your body that help is nearby. That the pill will fix this feeling next time. In the quiet moments, you start to realize something unsettling. The accidents aren't random. They're patterned. They happen when you're tired. When you've taken just a little more. When you assume your body will keep up without checking. You tell yourself you'll be more careful. That care will solve it. Historians still debate whether these warning signs were obvious in hindsight or invisible in the moment. Standing in your kitchen, gingerly testing your weight on a bruised leg. You understand the answer is both. You see the pattern. You just don't know what to do with it yet. So you keep adjusting. Keep compensating. Keep laughing things off. Because stopping doesn't feel like a solution. It feels like a problem you're not ready to face. People don't leave all at once. They thin out, drift, fade at the edges of your life until you realize the room feels larger, quieter, and somehow less forgiving. At first, you tell yourself this is just adulthood, schedules diverging, priorities shifting, everyone getting busy. That explanation works until it doesn't. Someone stops inviting you out as often. Another starts checking their watch whenever you speak. Like they're measuring something. You notice the pauses in conversation. The way people wait for you to finish sentences you don't quite complete. No one says anything directly. Directness would be rude. This decade prides itself on vibe over confrontation. That's just how people are. You tell yourself. That's joke number 1, blaming human nature for chemistry. In the 1970s, this kind of social erosion was common among heavy sedative users. Though few recognized it at the time. Slowness reads as depth for a while. Then it reads as absence. Historians still debate whether friends pulled away out of concern, frustration, or simple fatigue, watching another invitation fail to materialize. The answer feels painfully practical. It's exhausting to orbit someone who's never quite there. You still show up. You still sit on couches. Lean against walls. Laugh when laughter is expected. But your timing is off. Reactions arrive late. Stories trail into silence. You notice people filling in the gaps for you, finishing your thoughts. Answering questions you didn't respond to quickly enough. They're being helpful. It doesn't feel that way. One friend makes a gentle comment. You seem tired lately. The word lands softly, padded with concern. You nod, grateful for the explanation it provides. Tired is respectable. Tired doesn't require follow-up. You agree immediately. That's joke number 2, using exhaustion as a universal alibi. Inside, something tightens. Not anger, not shame, just a subtle awareness that the room is no longer adjusting to you. You're expected to keep up. And lately, you're not. The nights grow quieter. Fewer people. Fewer conversations. The ones who remain share the same rhythm you do, slow, heavy, unhurried. You gravitate toward them without thinking. It feels easier, less demanding. This isn't a conscious choice. It's alignment. Here's a lesser-known social detail from the era. Sedative use often reshaped friend groups rather than destroying them outright. People clustered by pace, tolerance, and availability. Historians still debate whether this was self-selection or subtle exclusion. Sitting among others who blink slowly and speak carefully. It feels like relief. But something is missing. You notice it in the laughter that doesn't quite lift you. In the conversations that loop without going anywhere. You miss unpredictability. You miss sharpness. You miss being surprised by yourself. The drug smooths everything, including the parts that used to make connection spark. One night, you tell a story you've told before. Halfway through, you realize you're repeating it. No one stops you. They listen politely, nodding in the right places. You finish and laugh it off. Guess that one stuck, you say. That's joke number 3. It lands thinly. Later, alone, the repetition bothers you more than it should. Not because it's embarrassing, because it's unfamiliar. You don't remember repeating yourself like this before. Memory used to feel reliable. Now it feels edited. You try reaching out to someone you haven't seen in a while. You leave a message that feels cheerful enough. It goes unanswered longer than you expect. When the reply comes, it's warm but brief. Scheduling is complicated. Soon, maybe, you read it twice, searching for subtext that may not be there. Historically, this phase often went unnoticed by the person living it. Social withdrawal didn't feel dramatic. It felt gradual, justified by convenience and comfort. Historians still debate whether isolation accelerated dependence or merely reflected it. Sitting in your living room, pill dissolving, the answer feels circular. The drug becomes company now. Reliable, predictable. It doesn't get impatient when you pause too long. It doesn't finish your sentences. It doesn't drift away. You take it and settle in, feeling the familiar heaviness wrap around you like a blanket. Sleep follows, shallow and fragmented. Morning arrives with the same fog, the same negotiation. Another day shaped around managing yourself rather than meeting anyone else. You tell yourself you prefer it this way. Quieter, simpler, less demanding, and part of you believes that. But sometimes, usually when the pill hasn't quite kicked in yet, you notice the silence feels less like peace and more like absence. You don't panic. You don't reach out. You just wait for the softness to return and fill the space. And for now, it does. Sleep used to mean rest. Now it means disappearance. You close your eyes and fall out of consciousness so quickly it feels like being switched off rather than drifting down. There's no gentle descent, no wandering thoughts, no dreams that linger into morning. Just a sudden cut to black. At first, this felt efficient. You admired how quickly the night was handled. No tossing, no anxiety, no staring at the ceiling negotiating with tomorrow. You joke about it. I'm out before my head hits the pillow. That's joke number one, treating anesthesia like a superpower. But something's wrong with the mornings. You wake up heavy, as if sleep stacked weight on top of you instead of lifting it. Your limbs feel slow to respond, like they're still underwater. Your eyes open, but your mind takes its time catching up. There's no sense of restoration, just continuation. Whatever state you went down in, you come back up in roughly the same shape. This wasn't what sleep was supposed to do. Historically, this was a common but poorly understood effect of sedative hypnotics like Quaaludes. They didn't replicate natural sleep cycles. They suppressed them. REM sleep, the part associated with memory, mood regulation, and emotional processing, was often reduced or fragmented. Historians still debate how much long-term harm this disruption caused versus the damage attributed to lifestyle alone. Sitting on the edge of your bed, blinking into another dull morning, you feel the difference without needing the terminology. Dreams, when they appear, are strange now, short, disconnected, sometimes unpleasant. You'll wake with a feeling rather than an image, unease without narrative, tension without context. Other nights, there's nothing at all, just blankness. You start to miss dreams in the same way you miss conversations you didn't realize mattered until they stopped happening. You try skipping the pill one night, just to see. Sleep resists you immediately. Your body feels wired and exhausted at the same time. Thoughts race in uneven bursts, circling problems you don't have the energy to solve. You check the clock repeatedly, irritated by its honesty. When sleep finally arrives, it's thin and brittle. You wake more tired than when you lay down. You tell yourself this experiment proves nothing. Anyone would sleep poorly without their routine. That's joke number 2, calling dependency consistency. The next night, you don't experiment. You take the pill earlier than usual, hoping for a deeper rest. It works, sort of. You drop fast again. Too fast. The darkness feels thicker this time. Less like sleep and more like absence. Morning arrives with a headache that sits behind your eyes. Dense and unmoving. Your days start to feel like they're happening to someone else. You're present enough to function, but distant enough not to care deeply about outcomes. You complete tasks, but they don't stick in memory. Hours vanish. You look back on a day and struggle to find a moment that stands out. Here's a lesser-known effect that becomes increasingly relevant. Chronic sedative use can create a state of constant partial sleep deprivation. Even while increasing total hours asleep, you're unconscious more often, but rested less. Historians still debate whether users recognized this as exhaustion or simply adapted to a lower baseline. You suspect the latter, because you've stopped expecting to feel good in the morning at all. People comment on how low energy you seem. You nod, accepting the label. It explains things without requiring change. Low energy sounds manageable. Fixable someday. Not urgent. Evenings become about chasing a specific kind of shutdown. Not pleasure. Not escape. Just silence. You want your thoughts to stop bumping into each other. You want the day to end cleanly. You take the pill and wait for the familiar heaviness to arrive. Adjusting the dose when it doesn't come fast enough. That's joke number 3. Treating sleep like a technical problem with adjustable settings. One night, you wake briefly in the dark and don't know where you are. The room feels unfamiliar. Your heart races for a few seconds before recognition trickles back in. You lie still, breathing deliberately, waiting for your body to calm down. This doesn't feel like a nightmare. It feels like disorientation. You start leaving lights on sometimes. Just a lamp, just enough to ground you if you surface unexpectedly. You don't think much of it. People leave lights on for all kinds of reasons. Over time, the boundary between night and day blurs further. Fatigue becomes constant, not crushing, just ever-present. You don't remember the last time you woke up excited or even neutral. You wake up prepared instead, bracing gently for another managed day. Historians still debate when sleep loss becomes a driver rather than a symptom of addiction. Standing in the shower, letting hot water do what rest no longer does. You feel the answer settle quietly. You're not sleeping to recover anymore. You're sleeping to pause. And when pause becomes the goal, waking up starts to feel like the interruption. You don't say that out loud. You just take the pill, close your eyes, and let yourself disappear again, hoping that tomorrow will feel lighter. Knowing, somewhere deep down, that it probably won't. The first whispers don't sound like withdrawal. They sound like mood, like temperament, like the kind of vague internal weather people blame on stress, aging, or the general state of the world. You wake up one morning feeling tight, coiled in a way that has nothing to do with muscles. Your hands feel restless. Your thoughts move too fast. Then stall. Then jump again. You tell yourself you're just keyed up. That happens. Everyone gets keyed up sometimes. That's joke number 1, calling your nervous system dramatic. But the feeling doesn't pass. It hums under everything you do. A low-level agitation that refuses to be ignored. You tap your fingers without realizing it. Your jaw clenches. Small inconveniences feel disproportionately irritating. Like static shocks to the brain. Sounds scrape. Light feels intrusive. People talking feels like a personal challenge. You check the clock more often than usual. Time feels wrong, too slow and too fast at the same time. You think about evening with an intensity that surprises you. Not craving. Exactly. Just awareness. Like noticing hunger after skipping a meal. Historically, this phase confused a lot of people. Early withdrawal from sedatives didn't always look dramatic. No shaking, no sweating, just unease. Anxiety without a clear source. Restlessness that couldn't be soothed by logic. Historians still debate how many users mistook these symptoms for personality changes rather than chemistry reasserting itself. Sitting at your desk, bouncing one knee unconsciously, you feel the confusion firsthand. You decide to wait it out. You're not panicking. You're curious. You want to see how long this lasts. You make it through most of the day. Irritable but functional. You snap at someone over nothing. Then apologize too quickly. The apology feels forced, like damage control rather than regret. By late afternoon, the hum has grown louder. Your skin feels wrong, like it doesn't fit quite right. You feel both wired and exhausted. A combination that makes thinking feel slippery. You start pacing without realizing it, stopping only when you notice what you're doing. That evening, you delay on purpose, just to prove something to yourself. You sit on the couch, hands folded, staring at the wall. Minutes stretch. The discomfort sharpens. Not pain, pressure. Like something inside you is insisting on being addressed. You take the pill. The relief is immediate and almost embarrassing. Your shoulders drop. The buzzing under your skin smooths out. Your thoughts slow into something manageable. You exhale deeply, surprised by how long you've been holding your breath. That's joke number 2, calling relief gratitude. The contrast is too clean to ignore. Before, agitation. After, calm. Your body has made its position very clear. This isn't about liking the drug anymore. It's about avoiding what happens when it's gone. The next morning, you wake up with the same tightness, but sooner. It arrives earlier now, creeping in before you've fully oriented yourself. You stretch, trying to shake it off. It doesn't budge. You drink coffee. It gets worse. Your heart rate ticks up slightly. Enough to notice but not enough to alarm. You tell yourself you'll be careful today. That you won't overreact. That this doesn't mean anything definitive. People feel anxious all the time. That's just modern life. That's joke number 3, blaming society for a chemical imbalance. By midday, the agitation has settled into your bones. You find it hard to focus on anything that isn't the feeling itself. Conversations feel intrusive. Tasks feel pointless. You start counting the hours until evening again. Not with excitement, but with calculation. When you finally take the pill, the relief feels less like pleasure and more like maintenance. Like tightening a loose bolt before it rattles everything apart. You don't feel good, you feel normal. And that distinction lands with quiet weight. Sleep that night is shallow but uninterrupted. Morning brings the whispers back almost immediately. You recognize them now. There's no novelty left. This is a pattern. Historians still debate when dependence becomes unavoidable, whether it's a matter of dose, duration, or individual biology. Sitting on the edge of your bed, hands clasped, waiting for your body to settle, you realize the answer doesn't matter much anymore. Your nervous system has drawn a boundary. On one side, calm, achieved chemically. On the other, agitation, waiting patiently. You haven't lost control in a dramatic way. You haven't hit bottom. Nothing has exploded. But you've crossed into a quieter territory. One where the drug isn't enhancing your life, or even numbing it. It's simply keeping the noise down. And now that you know how loud the noise can get, going without the pill doesn't feel brave. It feels irresponsible. So you do what feels reasonable. You plan around it. You keep supplies steady. You avoid running out. You tell yourself this is temporary. That you'll address it later, when things calm down. For now, you just want the whispers to stop. And they do. As soon as the pill dissolves, and the world lowers its voice again, doctors stop smiling first. You notice it in the eyes, not the words. The words are still polite, measured, professional, padded with concern, but the warmth has thinned. Questions linger a little longer than they used to. Pauses stretch. You can feel someone assessing you instead of listening. How often are you taking these? Have you tried sleeping without them? Any side effects? You answer smoothly. You've rehearsed without realizing it. You keep things vague but reasonable. Not every night, just when needed. You sound like someone who deserves trust. That's joke number 1, performing responsibility while quietly redefining it. By the late 1970s, this moment is becoming common. Medical skepticism is catching up to cultural reality. Quaaludes are no longer the carefree solution they once were. Doctors are being warned. Guidelines tighten. Prescriptions shrink or disappear altogether. Historians still debate whether this shift came too late or too suddenly. Sitting in an exam room that smells faintly of disinfectant and judgment, you feel caught in between. Your refill doesn't come easily anymore. Sometimes it doesn't come at all. You're offered alternatives, different pills with unfamiliar names. Different effects. Different risks. You try a few. None of them work the same way. Some make you jittery. Others knock you out too hard. None restore that specific, manageable quiet you've grown dependent on. You don't argue. Arguing would look defensive. You nod. You thank them. You leave. Outside, you sit in your car longer than necessary. Hands resting on the wheel. Staring at the dashboard like it might offer solutions. This isn't panic. It's planning. You're good at planning now. That's joke number 2, calling desperation logistics. Street supply fills the gap more often than you'd like to admit. Contacts multiply. Information circulates. Which pills are reliable this week? Which batches to avoid? The vocabulary becomes second nature. You don't feel like you're doing anything extreme. You feel like you're compensating for a system that changed the rules mid-game. Your body, meanwhile, is less forgiving than it used to be. Miss a dose and the agitation returns faster than before. Your hands tremble slightly. Your thoughts race, then stall. You feel hot and cold at the same time. Sleep without the drug feels impossible now. Not just unpleasant. You tell yourself this is temporary. That once things stabilize, work, life, The decade itself, you'll deal with it properly. That's joke number 3. Promising a future version of yourself a problem you're creating right now. The nights blur together again. But differently this time. Less euphoria, more management. You take just enough to function, to rest, to quiet the edges. The pill has lost its mystique. It's no longer a treat or a tool. It's a requirement. One evening, you misjudge availability. A contact falls through. A call goes unanswered. You're left counting pills with more urgency than you're comfortable with. The realization hits you quietly. Running out is no longer inconvenient. It's terrifying. You don't sleep that night, not really. You pace. You sit. You lie down and get back up again. Your skin buzzes. Your thoughts spiral in short, unproductive loops. You feel like your body is asking for something you can't provide. The experience is deeply humbling. By morning, you're exhausted in a way that sleep can't fix. You secure what you need later that day. And when relief comes, it's overwhelming enough to make you feel foolish for ever doubting the system you built. Historians still debate when medical control gave way to underground dependence during this era. Living inside the transition, you feel the shift in your bones. You didn't leave the doctor behind. The doctor left you behind. And now, your relationship with the drug is no longer mediated by white coats or friendly advice. It's private, isolated, managed in shadows and favors. As you swallow the pill that finally quiets the storm, one truth settles in without drama. You are no longer maintaining a habit. You are maintaining yourself. And the margin for error has never felt smaller. The pills stop feeling like pills. They become timekeepers. You don't measure days by mornings and nights anymore. You measure them by when you last dosed and how long you have before the edges start pressing in again. Time isn't linear now. It's cyclical, tight, and impatient. You wake already aware of the clock. Not because you're late for anything, but because your body is tracking something more urgent. The agitation creeps in earlier these days. Sometimes before your feet touch the floor. Your hands feel faintly electric. Your chest tightens in a way that doesn't quite count as anxiety, but insists on being noticed anyway. You try to ignore it. You really do. You stretch. You breathe. You tell yourself to calm down. That's joke number 1, telling chemistry to behave. By mid-morning, the discomfort has settled into a steady thrum. You're functional, but only just. Conversations feel louder than necessary. Small delays irritate you more than they should. You notice your patience thinning like fabric worn too often in the same place. Historically, this is where many users crossed an invisible threshold. Dependence stopped being episodic and became structural. The drug didn't just smooth evenings, it regulated days. Historians still debate whether people recognized this shift when it happened or only years later in retrospect. Sitting there, bouncing your knee without realizing it, you suspect most people didn't notice until there was no alternative left. You start dosing earlier than you used to. Not dramatically earlier, just enough to take the edge off. You tell yourself this is harm reduction. Better to stabilize than to spiral. That logic feels airtight when the relief hits within minutes, calming your muscles and slowing your breath. That's joke number 2, calling surrender strategy. The effect isn't pleasant anymore. It's corrective. Your body relaxes the way a cramped hand does when it finally releases. You don't feel good. You feel able to think, able to sit still, able to exist without feeling like your nerves are scraping against the inside of your skin. As the day goes on, the cycle repeats. Relief fades. Discomfort rises. You adjust. You plan. You carry pills the way other people carry keys, checking their presence reflexively. Touching your pocket to reassure yourself they're still there. Here's a lesser-known physiological detail that deepens the trap. With chronic sedative use, the brain's baseline excitability increases. Remove the depressant, and the system rebounds harder than before. Historians still debate how much of withdrawal severity was caused by dosage versus duration. From inside your body, it feels like both are conspiring against you. You try skipping an afternoon dose once, just to test yourself. The result is immediate and unpleasant. Your heart rate jumps. Your thoughts fragment. A sense of impending wrongness settles over you. Vague but insistent. You abandon the experiment quickly, annoyed at yourself for even trying. That's joke number 3, calling self-control a bad idea. The nights are quieter now, but not peaceful. You take what you need and lie down, letting the heaviness press you into the mattress. Sleep arrives, but it's shallow and restless. You wake more often, aware of your heart, your breathing, the dark shape of the room. You keep water nearby. Sometimes you leave a light on again. Morning comes too soon. It always does. The cycle resets before you've fully recovered from the last one. Fatigue piles up, not from effort but from constant regulation. Managing your nervous system has become a full-time job, one that doesn't pay and never takes days off. Social life continues to shrink, but you barely notice now. Interaction requires energy you don't have. You prefer predictable environments where nothing unexpected demands reaction time you can't guarantee. This feels like preference, not limitation. Historians still debate whether isolation was a cause or consequence of deep dependence. Sitting alone, pill dissolving, the answer feels academic. Cause and consequence have collapsed into the same thing. One afternoon, you catch your reflection in a window and don't quite recognize it. Not dramatically, just a sense that something has shifted. Your posture is different. Your eyes look tired in a specific way. Not sad, not sick, just worn. You look away quickly. Mirrors ask questions you don't have the bandwidth to answer. The drug no longer offers escape or pleasure or even quiet. It offers stability, a narrow band of functioning you must stay within to avoid discomfort. You walk that line carefully, dosing just enough, just often enough. This is what historians later describe as full dependence, not marked by chaos, but by precision, by the constant, exhausting effort required to feel normal. You don't feel trapped. You feel managed. And in a strange, unsettling way, you've gotten very good at it. Hospitals enter your life sideways. Not as emergencies, those still feel like something that happens to other people, but as inevitabilities you didn't plan for. It starts with a morning you can't quite stand upright through. The room tilts harder than usual. Your heart races in uneven bursts. Breathing feels manual, like you forgot how to automate it. You tell yourself it's nothing. Dehydration, bad sleep, one of those days. That's joke number 1, diagnosing yourself with optimism. But when you try to walk it off and nearly fold into the wall instead, the decision gets made for you. Someone insists. Someone drives. Someone speaks calmly while you focus on staying upright and not alarming anyone more than necessary. The emergency room smells like disinfectant and time. Fluorescent lights hum. Everything feels too bright, too sharp. You sit in a chair meant for sitting, not for waiting out a nervous system that feels like it's misfiring. A nurse asks questions. You answer selectively. You're honest enough to sound cooperative, vague enough to feel safe. This was a common scene by the end of the 1970s, quieter visits where no one overdosed. No one collapsed dramatically, but something was clearly wrong. Heart palpitations, confusion, unsteady gait. Historians still debate how many of these visits were coded as anxiety or exhaustion rather than drug interaction or withdrawal. Sitting there, fingers trembling slightly, you understand how easy mislabeling can be. They check your vitals. They ask about alcohol. You mention it casually. They ask about medications. You pause just long enough to choose your words carefully. You don't lie. You just don't explain. Explanation invites consequences. After a while, minutes or hours, it's hard to tell. You're told you're stable. That word lands oddly. Stable implies something that could go either way. You're advised to rest, hydrate, reduce stress. The advice feels both generic and deeply insufficient. You go home with no answers and a quiet warning embedded in tone rather than language. That night, you take your pill with a new awareness. Not fear, respect. You notice how your body waits for it now. How quickly the relief arrives. Your heart settles. Your breathing smooths out. You feel foolishly grateful. That's joke number 2, thanking the cause for relieving the effect. The next day, you tell the story lightly. Spent a few hours in the Probably just stress. People nod. Stress is believable. Stress is fashionable. No one pushes further. You don't want them to. But the visits repeat. Not often. Just enough. A fall that needs stitches. A night of palpitations that won't calm down. A morning of confusion that feels wrong in a way you can't quite articulate. Each time, you walk away. Each time, you tell yourself it's a fluke. Here's a lesser-known medical reality that fits uncomfortably well. Sedative dependence can mask serious symptoms until the body is pushed too far. Then exaggerate them suddenly. Historians still debate how many late-stage emergencies were preventable if early signs had been recognized. Watching the automatic doors slide open again. You don't feel preventable. You feel caught. You start learning the rhythms of the hospital. Which hours are quieter? Which staff ask fewer questions? How to present symptoms without triggering deeper scrutiny. This is not something you're proud of. It's something you adapt to. That's joke number 3, calling adaptation experience. The drug becomes more important after each visit. Not less. The discomfort without it feels riskier now. Your body has demonstrated what happens when things get out of balance. You're not chasing calm anymore, you're preventing collapse. Nights grow heavier. You lie still, monitoring your own breathing, listening to your heart like it might change tempo without warning. You keep water close. You keep pills closer. You tell yourself you're being responsible. Sleep comes, but it's guarded. You wake often, checking yourself, reassured only when the familiar heaviness returns. Morning brings fatigue layered on top of relief. By now, the illusion that this is sustainable has thinned. But it hasn't broken. You're still functioning. Still mobile. Still yourself. In some essential sense. You haven't hit bottom. That phrase floats through your mind occasionally. Undefined but comforting. Historians still debate whether hitting bottom is a useful concept or a dangerous myth. Sitting on your couch, pill dissolving. You suspect it's dangerous precisely because it suggests everything before it was manageable. You don't feel dramatic enough to be in trouble. You feel complicated. And complications, as you've learned, are easy to live with for a long time until suddenly they aren't. Tomorrow will come. You'll adjust again. You always do. For now, you breathe evenly, heart settling into rhythm, the room softening at the edges. The hospital lights fade back into memory. And you promise yourself, quietly, vaguely, that you'll be more careful. Not tomorrow. Just soon. Time stops behaving the way you remember it. Not suddenly. Not with a dramatic snap, but gradually. Like a clock that's been losing minutes for so long you can't say when it started lying to you. Days blur. Weeks compress. You look back and struggle to separate last month from last season. You still wake. You still doze. You still move through the required motions of being a person. But the sequence has flattened. Mornings bleed into afternoons. Afternoons dissolve into evenings. Nights arrive not as rest, but as reset points. Checkpoints where you recalibrate chemistry and start the loop again. This loss of temporal clarity was quietly common among long-term Quaalude users. Sedation disrupted memory formation while withdrawal disrupted attention, creating gaps where time should have anchored experience. Historians still debate whether people realized time was slipping while it happened or only noticed later. When they tried to remember when something occurred and couldn't. Sitting there, staring at a calendar you haven't updated, you feel the answer settle uncomfortably close. You catch yourself saying things like, recently, instead of dates. The other day, instead of last week. Specifics feel unnecessary. They also feel harder to retrieve. When someone asks how long you've been dealing with this meaning exhaustion, or pills, or hospital visits, you hesitate too long. The answer refuses to line up. That's joke number 1. Losing track of time so thoroughly it becomes a conversational style. Work, if it's still part of your life in a structured way, becomes increasingly procedural. You rely on habit instead of memory. Checklists instead of recall. You finish tasks without feeling them finish. Completion doesn't land emotionally anymore. It just happens. Like a notification you swipe away without reading. Here's a lesser-known neurological detail that fits this moment precisely. Chronic sedative use can fragment episodic memory while leaving procedural memory intact. You remember how to do things but not when or why you did them. Historians still debate how much of this cognitive flattening was reversible. From inside your head, it feels less like forgetting and more like compression. Your life being saved in a lower resolution format. You notice it socially, too. Conversations loop. You tell the same anecdote twice in a week. Maybe twice in the same night. People smile politely. Some gently remind you. Others don't bother. You laugh it off. Guess I'm stuck on repeat. That's joke number 2. And it lands thinly. Evenings are no longer something you look forward to. They're something you manage toward. You watch the clock not with anticipation, but with a kind of relief, as if time itself is an obstacle you're clearing rather than an experience you're entering. You take your dose and feel the familiar leveling out. Not pleasure. Not even calm. Just evenness. The jagged edges smooth down. The internal noise drops to a tolerable hum. You sit still, grateful not to feel wrong anymore. Sleep comes, but it doesn't mark anything. You wake unsure whether you slept for hours or minutes. Dreams, if they occur, dissolve instantly. Morning feels like a continuation rather than a beginning. By now, you've stopped marking milestones. Birthdays pass unnoticed. Holidays feel abstract. The calendar keeps moving, but you don't follow it closely anymore. Everything important feels internal, dosing schedules. Symptom management. Avoiding gaps. Historians still debate whether this temporal collapse was one of the most damaging long-term effects of sedative dependence. Standing in your kitchen, coffee cooling untouched because you forgot it was there. You suspect it was. Without time, reflection becomes difficult. Without reflection, change feels theoretical. You tell yourself you'll get organized again someday. Buy a planner. Set reminders. Clean things up. That's joke number 3, treating cognitive erosion like a scheduling issue. But tonight, like every night, the focus narrows. The world quiets. The present compresses into a manageable slice. You sit, breathe, wait for the heaviness to settle just right. The past feels distant. The future feels vague. Only now feels solid, and only briefly. As you close your eyes, another day slides into the same blurred archive as the rest. Not lost. Just unsorted. And you drift off knowing that tomorrow will come whether you notice it or not. It always does. Fear arrives late to this story. And when it does, it's oddly polite. It doesn't crash in with alarms or visions of disaster. It shows up in headlines you don't quite finish reading and jokes that land a little too close to home. The tone has changed. You can feel it in the air. Like humidity before a storm. Newspapers talk about Quaaludes differently now. Not as a trend. Not as a lifestyle accessory. As a problem. Stories mention accidents, overdoses, ruined lives, always someone else's. Always somewhere slightly removed from your own routine. You skim, absorb just enough to feel informed. Then move on. That's joke number 1, confusing awareness with immunity. Television segments use words like epidemic and crackdown. The delivery is dramatic, but the details are vague. Numbers without faces. Faces without names. You watch from the couch. Pill already dissolving. And feel a strange detachment. They're talking about a phenomenon. Not about you. You're too ordinary to be part of a phenomenon. Historically, this is when public perception swung hard. By the end of the 1970s, Quaaludes had crossed an invisible line, from fashionable sedative to cultural menace. Media attention surged. Politicians noticed. Law enforcement followed. Historians still debate whether this panic helped reduce harm or simply drove use further underground. Sitting there, volume low, you feel the shift as pressure rather than guidance. Friends start making comments. Not accusations, observations. They're really coming down on that stuff now. Did you hear what happened to so-and-so? The stories are always secondhand. Softened by distance. You nod along, contributing just enough to stay part of the conversation. Inside, something tightens. You don't feel scared of the drug. You feel scared of being noticed. That's joke number 2. Realizing anonymity was part of the appeal. Your routines adapt quietly. You're more careful about where you take pills. Who sees you? Who knows how much? Information becomes selective. You don't volunteer details anymore. Silence feels protective. The irony is that the fear doesn't slow you down, it sharpens your focus. You plan more precisely. You avoid excess. You stick to what works. This feels like maturity, like learning from cautionary tales without becoming one. Here's a lesser-known social detail from this period. Public fear often peaked after private harm had already spread. Many users adjusted their behavior not to stop, but to blend. Historians still debate whether this delayed help-seeking by years. Sitting there, mentally reviewing who knows what about you. You suspect it did. One night, you hear about a raid. Someone you barely know, connected loosely through your supply chain, gets arrested. Nothing dramatic, just a brief mention. A cautionary note. The news sends a ripple through your circle. Calls go unanswered. Plans change. Availability tightens. Your heart races, not with withdrawal, but with calculation. Who's safe? Who's risky? You tell yourself this is temporary. Things always stabilize eventually. That's joke number 3, assuming the system will bend back around you. The next day, you feel exposed in a way you haven't before. Not paranoid, just alert. You notice police cars more often. You wonder who's watching. The world feels less neutral. You don't like this feeling. You compensate the only way you know how, by dosing carefully. Keeping your nervous system as flat as possible. The drug still works. That's the problem. It smooths fear the same way it smooths everything else. Headlines fade. Stories lose their edge. The urgency dulls. You tell yourself you'll reassess later, when things are clearer. But clarity never quite arrives. The culture has turned against the thing you rely on. And that tension hums quietly in the background of every decision you make. You're no longer just managing chemistry, you're managing visibility. As you settle into another evening, pill dissolving, television murmuring about problems that feel both distant and uncomfortably close, a thought drifts through you without fully forming. You used to worry about running out. Now you worry about being seen. And that shift, subtle as it is, marks another quiet step deeper. Not into chaos, but into a careful, constricted version of normal that keeps shrinking around you. You breathe evenly. You stay still. You let the night pass without incident. That's the goal now. Not happiness. Not pleasure. Just not being the story they're talking about. The realization doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in gradually, like a piece of furniture you keep bumping into until one day you finally acknowledge it's not going anywhere. You notice it when you try, honestly try, to delay a dose and fail within minutes. Not because of pain, not because of panic, because your body refuses the idea. You sit there, hands folded, telling yourself to wait just a little longer. 5 minutes. 10. The discomfort rises with surprising speed. Like water filling a tub with the drain sealed shut. Your thoughts scatter. Your skin buzzes. Your heart ticks a little too loudly in your ears. The world sharpens in a way that feels personal. You stop pretending this is optional. That's joke number 1, calling inevitability acceptance. By now, this stage has a name, though you don't use it. Full dependence. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just complete. The drug doesn't enhance your life anymore. It doesn't even stabilize it in the way it used to. It simply schedules you. Every plan, every outing, every night away from home is filtered through one question: how will I maintain this? Historically, this was the point many users quietly recognized they were no longer choosing. The choice had already been made, repeated enough times to become structural. Historians still debate whether awareness at this stage helped or harmed, whether naming the problem increased shame or sparked change. Sitting there, counting minutes instead of pills, you understand why many people stayed silent. You don't feel out of control. That's the unsettling part. You feel precise, disciplined. You know exactly how much you need and when. You know the signs of too little and too much. You avoid extremes carefully. Chaos feels amateurish. You've refined this. That's joke number 2, confusing mastery with freedom. Your days now revolve around maintenance. You wake, assess your body, plan accordingly. You don't think in terms of wanting or liking. You think in terms of preventing. Preventing agitation. Preventing collapse. Preventing the kind of attention that leads to questions you can't answer safely. Miss a window, and your body reminds you immediately. The unease escalates faster than it used to. Your hands tremble. Your thoughts fragment. You feel heat flush through you without warning. It's not pain. It's insistence. Your nervous system demanding compliance. When relief comes, it's mechanical. Flip the switch. Restore baseline. You don't sigh anymore. You don't savor it. You simply continue. Sleep is lighter now, broken into pieces by awareness of your own body. You wake frequently, checking yourself, reassured only when the heaviness is still there. Morning arrives with the same negotiation, the same calculation. Social life has thinned to almost nothing. Not because you don't care, but because care requires bandwidth you don't have. People feel unpredictable. Environments feel risky. You prefer controlled spaces where you can sit, breathe, and remain unnoticed. Historians still debate whether isolation at this stage was chosen or imposed. Sitting alone, pill dissolving, you suspect it was both. The world became demanding. You became less able to meet it halfway. One night, the thought forms clearly for the first time: not fear, not self-pity, just observation. You are no longer maintaining a habit. You are maintaining equilibrium. Without the drug, equilibrium collapses. With it, life continues, flat, narrow, but manageable. That calculation answers itself every time. That's joke number 3. Calling survival a lifestyle. You consider stopping sometimes. Briefly, abstractly. The idea appears, then dissolves under the weight of logistics, fear, and exhaustion. Stopping would require help, exposure, vulnerability. You don't have room for that right now. Maybe later. For now, the goal is simpler. Get through the day. Get through the night. Avoid attention. Avoid extremes. You do all of that very well. Too well. As you settle into another evening, the pill working right on schedule, the world lowering its voice once again, you feel something close to resignation, but without sadness. Just clarity. The drug doesn't ask whether you want this life. It already knows the answer. And as long as it keeps the noise down, as long as it keeps you functioning, as long as it prevents the worst parts from breaking through, You'll keep showing up. On time. Every time. To the only appointment that matters now. The one with the pill. You remember the feeling you're chasing more clearly than you remember when you last felt it. That's the strange part. The memory is vivid, warm, smooth, expansive, while the present version feels dull by comparison. You tell yourself the difference is timing, or dosage, or quality, something technical, something fixable. Tonight, you decide. You'll get it right. You prepare carefully. You space things out. You choose the pills you trust most. The ones that have behaved before. You make sure the environment is quiet, controlled, familiar. No surprises. No variables. You're not reckless. You're intentional. That's joke number 1, calling obsession precision. You take the dose and wait. The heaviness arrives. But it's blunt, not gentle. The edges blur. But they don't glow the way they used to. You add a little more. Convinced you're close. You remember how it felt. How the calm used to spread evenly. How your thoughts used to stretch instead of sink. What you get instead is thickness. Your limbs feel heavy. But your mind doesn't float. It sinks. Thoughts slow. But not pleasantly. Words become harder to form. You try to focus on the sensation. To coax it into becoming what you remember. It doesn't. Historically, many long-term users described a last good high, a moment when they realized. In hindsight, that something had ended. Not dramatically. Not with a bang. Just with a quiet disappointment. Historians still debate whether this was psychological nostalgia or a real neurochemical ceiling. Sitting there, blinking slowly at nothing in particular. You feel the loss without fully naming it. You add a drink, not because you want to, but because you've learned it sometimes bridges the gap. The combination deepens the sedation, but it doesn't restore the feeling. It just presses you down further. You're not calm. You're pinned. That's joke number 2, calling immobility relaxation. Your breathing feels shallow. Not alarming, just noticeable. You sit very still, focusing on keeping it steady. This wasn't the plan. You wanted softness, not vigilance. The irony doesn't escape you. Even in this slowed state. When you finally stand up, the room tilts aggressively. You grab the edge of the table. Annoyed more than scared. Annoyed that this is what it takes now. Annoyed that the payoff keeps shrinking while the effort grows. You make it to the couch and lie back, staring at the ceiling. The music you put on earlier feels too loud now. Too insistent. You turn it down, then off entirely. Silence feels safer. Sleep, when it comes, is heavy and fractured. You drift in and out, half aware of your own body, half lost in shallow dreams that dissolve before they take shape. Morning arrives abruptly, with a headache that feels earned rather than accidental. You wake with a sense of mild grief. Not dramatic, just disappointment. The kind you feel when you realize a favorite place has changed and won't ever feel the same again. The feeling you're chasing isn't gone because you did something wrong. It's gone because your body can't produce it anymore. Here's the lesser-known truth that makes this harder to accept. Tolerance doesn't just raise the bar. It reshapes the reward system entirely. What once felt expansive now feels neutral. What once felt calming now feels necessary. Historians still debate how reversible this process was for sedative users. Sitting on the edge of the bed, head in your hands, you don't feel like debating. You feel tired. The day stretches ahead of you, heavy and flat. You move through it carefully, conserving energy, avoiding anything that demands too much from you. The thought of tonight doesn't excite you anymore. It weighs on you. But when evening arrives, you still prepare, you still doze, you still hope, quietly, irrationally, that maybe this time will be different. That's joke number 3, believing in a comeback. The pill works the way it always does now. It lowers the noise. It steadies the edges. It does not deliver joy. It does not deliver relief in the way it once did. It simply restores baseline and stops there. You sit with that reality longer than you have before. The drug has reached its ceiling. You haven't. And the space between those two truths feels uncomfortable in a way that sedation can no longer smooth over. You don't panic. You don't make a plan. You just lie there, eyes half closed, letting the disappointment settle. Aware, for the first time, that the thing you've been chasing is no longer ahead of you. It's behind you. And no amount of careful dosing is going to bring it back. The shift becomes official without ever feeling personal. One day, the word illegal starts appearing where casual language used to live. Not shouted, not dramatized, just printed plainly, spoken carefully, enforced quietly. The last door doesn't slam shut, it clicks. You hear about it first through someone else. They reclassified it, they say, like they're talking about a zoning change or a tax rule. You nod, absorbing the information without reacting. Reaction feels dangerous now. Reaction draws attention. By the early 1980s, this moment becomes a clear historical line: full criminalization. Quaaludes move from controversial to contraband. Supply chains fracture further. Penalties sharpen. Historians still debate whether prohibition reduced harm or simply transformed it. Sitting there, pill in hand, the debate feels irrelevant. The pill hasn't changed. Your need hasn't changed. Only the consequences have. You don't feel rebellious. You feel exposed. That's joke number 1. Becoming a criminal by standing still. Everything you do becomes quieter. You don't talk about it anymore. Even with people you trust. Trust feels theoretical now. You reduce visibility. You reduce movement. You stick to routines that minimize risk. Not because you're paranoid, but because you're tired. The drug becomes harder to find, more expensive, less predictable. Pills change shape again, color, texture, taste. Each one carries a quiet question mark. You inspect them like a mechanic checking parts that might fail at speed. You take them anyway. Because stopping isn't a legal decision. It's a physiological one. And your body doesn't care what Congress decided this year. Here's a lesser-known consequence of criminalization that historians still argue over, as enforcement increases. Users often compress usage into tighter windows to reduce exposure. You start taking slightly more at once. Less often, not for pleasure, but for logistics. Fewer transactions. Fewer risks. The margin shrinks again. That's joke number 2, calling strategy harm reduction. The nights feel heavier now. Threaded with awareness. Every knock sounds louder. Every unexpected sound registers as potential trouble. You keep the lights low. You keep the television on for cover noise. The drug still lowers your internal volume. But it can't silence the world outside anymore. Sleep comes unevenly. You wake more often, listening. Your heart races at sounds that turn out to be nothing. You tell yourself this is just nerves. Anyone would feel jumpy under these circumstances. But the irony is sharp. The thing you rely on to feel calm is now the reason calm feels harder to achieve. You think about quitting more often now, not because you suddenly feel brave, but because the system you've built is getting harder to maintain. The logistics are exhausting. The risks feel closer. The safety net has thinned to almost nothing. Still, you don't stop. You adapt. You always have. Historically, this is when many people turned to substitutes, other sedatives, alcohol, whatever could fill the space quickly and quietly. You experiment cautiously, but nothing fits quite right. Some things are too sharp. Others are too chaotic. None replicate the narrow band of stability you need to function. Evenings become tense rituals. You measure. You wait. You listen. When relief comes, it's mixed with a dull awareness that the floor beneath you is less solid than it used to be. That's joke number 3, calling anxiety vigilance. By now, the world feels divided into safe and unsafe spaces. Safe means predictable. Unsafe means everything else. You limit yourself to the former as much as possible. This feels like wisdom, like self-preservation. But the walls are closing in. Not dramatically. Not with sirens. Just with paperwork, policy, and probability. You sit quietly, pill dissolving, television murmuring about laws that feel designed for someone else's life. You don't feel like a criminal. You feel like someone who missed the window to change course when it mattered. The drug hasn't betrayed you. The context has. And as the night settles in, heavier than usual, one truth becomes harder to ignore. You're no longer just managing your body. You're managing consequences. And consequences, unlike tolerance, don't level off. They accumulate. Slowly. Relentlessly. Just like everything else in your life now. Substitutes arrive dressed as solutions. They promise familiarity with fewer complications. Calm without the risk. Sleep without the noise. Someone suggests one thing. Someone else swears by another. The names blur together. Each one introduced with the same hopeful phrase. This might help. You approach them cautiously. You've learned caution the hard way. You start low. You wait. You observe. You're not chasing a high anymore. You're chasing stability. Anything that can hold the line feels worth considering. That's joke number 1, calling experimentation responsibility. The first substitute is disappointing in a familiar way. Too sharp on the edges. It lifts your anxiety just enough to remind you how much you dislike it. You spend the evening restless, unable to settle, watching the clock like it's personally antagonizing you. Sleep comes late and leaves early. Thin and unconvincing. The next option goes the other way. Too heavy. Too fast. It flattens you without warning, dropping you into a dense fog that feels less like calm and more like being buried. You wake with a headache and a sense of having lost time in a way that isn't restful at all. Historically, this phase was chaotic for many former Quaalude users. As availability disappeared, people cycled through replacements, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, alcohol, often layering them without fully understanding the risks. Historians still debate whether substitution prolonged dependence or simply changed its shape. Sitting there, rubbing your temples after another failed night, the theory feels painfully concrete. Alcohol becomes the most tempting stand-in. It's legal, accessible, socially acceptable. It doesn't raise eyebrows or require whispered arrangements. You try using it more deliberately. Measuring drinks the way you once measured pills. It helps, briefly. Then it makes things worse. Your sleep fractures. Your mornings grow harsher. Your mood dips lower. Alcohol dulls the noise but leaves behind a different kind of damage. You feel it in your stomach, your head, your patience. You scale it back, disappointed but not surprised. That's joke number 2, calling disappointment data. You try mixing substitutes, hoping they'll balance each other out. One to calm, one to soften, one to help you sleep. The results are unpredictable. Some nights are tolerable. Others feel dangerous in a way you can't quite articulate. Your body feels less trustworthy now, reacting sharply to small changes. You miss the narrow predictability of Quaaludes, the way they used to hold you in a specific range. Everything else feels either too much or not enough. The margin you need keeps shrinking. Your days reflect the strain. You're more tired than ever. Your movements feel heavier. Your thoughts feel slower, not from sedation but from effort. Aging seems to have accelerated quietly. Like someone fast-forwarded parts of your internal clock without asking. Here's a lesser-known physiological detail that adds to the confusion. Long-term sedative use can leave the nervous system hypersensitive, making it react poorly to both depressants and stimulants. You feel this mismatch constantly. Too much calm tips into collapse. Too little sparks agitation. There's no comfortable middle. Historians still debate whether this prolonged instability pushed people toward recovery or deeper entrenchment. Sitting alone, weighing options that all feel wrong. You understand why many chose familiarity over uncertainty, even when familiarity carried risk. You don't feel reckless. You feel exhausted. Every alternative requires calculation. Every night feels like a test you didn't study for. You long for simplicity, not pleasure. Not escape. Just something that works without demanding constant adjustment. That longing brings you back, again and again, to the thing that's hardest to replace. Even as it becomes rarer. Even as it becomes riskier. Even as it becomes less effective than it once was. That's joke number 3, calling inevitability preference. You don't decide anything dramatic. You don't swear off substitutes or recommit fully to the past. You simply keep rotating through options. Managing the best you can. Trying to avoid extremes. But your body feels older now. Not just tired, aged. Recovery takes longer. Small discomforts linger. You sit more. You move less. You avoid situations that demand energy you can't guarantee. Evenings stretch with indecision. You weigh risks. You count supplies. You settle for good enough more often than not. As night falls and you prepare for another uncertain attempt at rest, a quiet realization settles in. Substitutes don't fix the problem. They just move it around. And moving it around still costs energy you don't have anymore. You lie back, eyes half closed, listening to your own breathing, aware of how fragile the balance has become. The old solution is gone. The new ones don't fit. And you're caught in the space between. Older, slower, and running out of room to improvise. You don't notice the aging all at once. There's no birthday where everything suddenly feels different. It shows up in recovery time. in how long it takes your body to settle after a bad night, in the way soreness lingers where it used to fade by morning. You wake up stiff now. Not dramatically, just enough that you stretch before standing. Like it's part of a routine you never agreed to. Your joints complain quietly. Your muscles feel less forgiving. You tell yourself this is normal. Time does this to everyone. That's joke number 1, blaming the calendar for chemistry. But the fatigue feels deeper than age alone. It's not just tiredness. It's depletion, like your internal battery never quite reaches full anymore. No matter how long you rest. Sleep doesn't restore you. It just pauses the drain. Historically, long-term sedative users often reported accelerated physical decline that didn't map neatly onto their actual years. Muscle weakness, balance issues, slower reflexes. Symptoms that mimic aging without being caused by time itself. Historians still debate how reversible these changes were once the drug left the picture. Standing at the sink, steadying yourself with one hand while brushing your teeth. You don't feel like debating. You move more carefully now. You choose chairs with arms. You avoid sudden movements. You plan routes through rooms the way you used to plan routes through evenings. This doesn't feel like fear. It feels like adaptation. Your posture has changed. You notice it in reflections you don't linger on, shoulders slightly rounded. Head tilted forward, as if your body is protecting something fragile inside. You used to stand loosely. Now you brace. The mind changes too, not in sharp, alarming ways, but in softness. You lose words occasionally, simple ones. They return eventually. But the pause embarrasses you more than you let on. You laugh it off. Getting old, you say. That's joke number 2. And it lands easily because people expect it. But inside, you know this isn't just age. Your nervous system feels worn down, like it's been running at the edge of tolerance for too long. Small stresses hit harder. Recovery takes longer. You feel less resilient, less elastic. The idea of bouncing back feels abstract. Evenings come with less anticipation and more caution. You prepare your night the way someone with chronic illness prepares medication, carefully. Methodically. Without drama. You're not trying to feel good anymore. You're trying not to feel worse. The drug, or what remains of it in your life, still stabilizes you. But it doesn't lift you. It keeps you upright. It keeps you functioning. That's it. The ceiling has been low for a long time now. And you've stopped expecting more. Here's a lesser-known physiological reality that explains part of this. Prolonged nervous system suppression can lead to compensatory overactivity elsewhere. Stressing systems that were never meant to carry that load. Historians still debate whether users felt this as burnout, illness, or simply wear and tear. Sitting there, legs heavy, head dull, you feel all three at once. Your world shrinks further, not dramatically, just practically. You decline invitations more often. You avoid unfamiliar environments. You stick to what you know you can handle. This feels like wisdom, like pacing yourself. That's joke number 3, calling retreat maturity. You think about the people you used to know. Some drifted away quietly. Others disappeared suddenly. A few names carry weight now. Attached to stories you don't like to revisit. You wonder, occasionally, why you're still here when others aren't. The question doesn't feel guilty. It feels curious. The answer, you suspect. is not virtue or strength. It's caution. It's luck. It's timing. You survived by narrowing your life until it fit the limits your body imposed. You adapted instead of burning out spectacularly. You stayed just functional enough. Just careful enough. And now, the cost of that strategy shows up in small ways every day. You sit longer before standing. You think longer before speaking. You rest more than you act. The future feels shorter somehow. Not in years, just in energy. You don't imagine grand changes anymore. You imagine maintenance, stability, quiet. As night falls, you settle into your familiar spot. Body heavy, mind slower than it used to be. You take what you need, not hoping for anything more than balance. You close your eyes and listen to your breathing, aware of how much effort it takes to stay even. You don't feel dramatic about it. You just feel tired. Tired in a way that suggests this phase isn't temporary. It's cumulative. And whatever comes next will have to begin from here. From a body that has aged faster than the calendar says it should have. And a nervous system that's been carrying more weight than it was designed to bear. You start counting people without meaning to. Not deliberately, just quietly. The way the mind inventories absences when there's finally enough silence to hear them. Names surface at odd moments. Someone you used to sit next to. Someone who laughed too loudly. Someone whose phone stopped ringing back one day and never started again. You don't dramatize it. You don't call it grief. It feels more like accounting. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, this reckoning became common among survivors of sedative culture. Emergency rooms had their statistics. Newspapers had their cautionary stories. But the quieter tally happened in living rooms like yours, where people realized the circle had thinned without anyone formally announcing it. Historians still debate how many losses were directly caused by drugs and how many were accelerated by the slow erosion that followed them. Sitting there, breathing evenly, you suspect the distinction matters less than people think. You remember one person clearly tonight. You can picture how they used to sit, slouched, comfortable, always claiming the arm of the couch. They had the same look you do now, heavy-lidded, calm on the surface, quietly struggling underneath. At the time, you didn't recognize it as a mirror. You thought it was coincidence. They didn't make it. You don't replay the details. You've learned better than that. Details invite emotion, and emotion demands energy. You simply acknowledge the fact. The way you acknowledge weather. It happened. It changed the landscape. That's joke number one, calling survival neutrality. You wonder, occasionally, why you're still here. Not in a dramatic, guilt-ridden way. Just curiosity. You weren't the most disciplined. You weren't the luckiest, either. You made mistakes. Plenty of them. The answer, when it comes, feels almost insulting in its simplicity. You survived because you slowed down. You narrowed your life. You avoided peaks and valleys. You chose maintenance over intensity. You didn't burn bright. You dimmed. Here's a lesser-known observation from long-term studies of sedative users. Those who survived often weren't the ones who used the least, they were the ones who adapted fastest to limitation. They sat instead of stood. They stayed home instead of going out. They avoided mixing when possible. Historians still debate whether this was wisdom or quiet surrender. You understand both interpretations intimately. The cost of that strategy is everywhere now. In your body. In your days. In the way excitement feels theoretical rather than immediate. But you're here. Breathing. Present enough to notice that you are. That counts for something. You think about the nights that could have gone differently. The moments when you misjudged a dose. Or stood up too fast. Or mixed things without thinking it through. You remember how close some of those moments felt in retrospect. How thin the margin really was. You didn't know it at the time. Or maybe you did and chose not to look directly at it. Looking directly would have required change. Change felt impossible then. That's joke number 2, calling inevitability fate. You also think about the people who disappeared not because they died, but because they stopped trying. They faded out of systems, out of contact, out of records. They became stories told carefully. If at all, you don't know where they are now. You suspect some of them are still managing. Quietly. Somewhere like you. This is the part historians still argue about most fiercely. Whether survival itself should be counted as success. Did living through it justify the cost? Did adaptation preserve life or merely extend damage? Sitting in the dim light of your room, you feel the ambiguity settle in your chest. You don't feel triumphant. You feel reflective. There's a difference. You notice how your body responds now when you think about the past. Not with panic, not with longing, just a subtle tightening, a reminder that memory still has weight. You let it pass. You've learned not to hold onto things too tightly. Holding costs energy. You take stock of what remains. A body that works, mostly. A mind that still recognizes patterns, even if it moves slower through them. A life that's smaller, quieter, but stable enough to inhabit. You're not proud of the path you took, but you're not ashamed either. Shame implies choice. Pride implies victory. What you feel is closer to realism. That's joke number 3, calling realism wisdom. You wonder what someone younger would make of this story. Whether they'd see it as a warning, a tragedy, or just a strange artifact of a different era. Quaaludes belong to history now. Filed away with disco balls and ashtrays. Their danger softened by distance and nostalgia. You know better. You know that the danger was never just the drug. It was the promise of manageability. The idea that you could sand down life's edges without losing its shape. The belief that quiet always meant peace. Looking back, you can see where that belief led you. Into a narrow corridor that kept you alive but asked you to leave a lot behind at the door. You don't regret surviving. You just recognize the price. As night settles in again, familiar and unthreatening, you sit with the awareness that you're one of the ones who made it through, not untouched. Not unmarked, but still here. Still breathing. Still aware. Still capable of reflection. That, you decide, is not nothing. Tomorrow will come, as it always does. You'll manage it the way you've learned to, carefully. Quietly. With attention to balance. You won't pretend the past didn't happen. You won't romanticize it either. You'll carry it the way you carry everything now, gently. Without rushing. Aware of its weight. And for tonight, that's enough. Just enough. The pace slows on its own now. Not because you decide it should, but because your body has learned the value of gentleness the hard way. Movements are smaller. Thoughts take longer paths. Nothing rushes you anymore, not excitement. Not urgency. Not ambition. Those things belong to another version of you. one that lived faster and paid for it later. Tonight feels like many other nights. And that sameness is almost comforting. You sit where you usually sit. The room knows you. The chair fits your shape. Even the air feels familiar, settling around you without resistance. There's no drama left in any of this. Just routine, softened by time. This is where the story ends. Historically speaking, not with a headline or a statistic, but with survivors sitting quietly in rooms like this one, learning how to live with what remains. Historians still debate how many people carried these experiences forward silently, folding them into ordinary lives that never made it into records. You are one of those footnotes, a person shaped more by adaptation than by collapse. You don't think about the drug much anymore. At least not emotionally. It's just part of the background. Like old wiring in a house you no longer question as long as the lights turn on. You've stopped asking what might have been. That question doesn't help you sleep. Instead, you focus on what is. Your breathing is steady. Your heart is calm enough. Your body, though tired, is still cooperating. There's a quiet kindness in acknowledging that. The past drifts through you now without grabbing hold. Images soften as they pass, rooms, faces, nights that once felt endless. They blur together gently, losing their sharp edges, becoming impressions rather than demands. You don't fight this. You let memory behave the way it wants to behave tonight. Your eyelids grow heavier, not from sedation alone, but from permission. Permission to rest without analysis. Permission to stop reviewing. Permission to simply exist without fixing anything. This is the tone your body responds to now, low, steady, unthreatening. You lie back, noticing how the room fades when you stop looking directly at it. Sounds recede, thoughts stretch out, longer and softer, until they start dissolving on their own. There's nothing you need to remember. Nothing you need to prepare for right now. Just this moment. Just this breath. Just the gentle awareness that you made it through something that quietly ended a lot of other stories. Your body relaxes into the surface beneath you. Muscles loosen in stages. The effort of holding yourself upright, together, alert enough for the world, finally eases. Sleep approaches not like a drop, but like a slow dimming. You don't resist it. You don't chase it. You simply allow it. And as consciousness thins, the story thins with it, details fading, sentences trailing off. Meaning giving way to sensation. Sensation giving way to rest. Nothing presses on you now. Nothing demands attention. Only the steady rhythm of breathing. And the quiet certainty that for tonight, you are safe enough to let go. You drift. End of script. Sweet dreams.